Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Good to see everybody in the live chat. Hello. I know it's been forever since I've been live, but to anybody new here, welcome. I am JL. This is a Bridge the Divide live stream. Appreciate everybody being here. I see a whole bunch of people in the live chat there. Thank you all so much for hanging out. I do appreciate that. Let me go ahead and get my channel member banner up. There's a big, huge thank you to all the channel members who help to make this channel possible. So it's so good to see everybody. I know it's been forever. It's been so long since I've been live, but because I've just been working on content, things have been really ramped up with Week in Horror, the horror podcast and film productions over here. So it's just wild, doors kind of open, and all that work we've put in is kind of paying off. But it's good to finally go live because there's things that we need to talk about. Obviously, there's it's a wild and woolly world out there. And with stuff like, especially most recently, with things going on in the world, like Texas trying to pass, forcing the 10 Commandments to be in every single classroom, in the state, stuff like that, and then all the craziness that's going around. There's obviously things that we need to talk about. So I wanted to go live, and I also have a very, very special surprise. We have a special guest tonight, but before we get there, let me go ahead and say hi to everybody. Make sure I get everyone before we get to in the thick of it. Elizabeth Sylvester, so good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it. Bellywood is here, member of the Godless Army. Appreciate it. And if you would like to be a member of the Godless Army, you can support the channel. It's 99 cents per month. It's about as much as I value my content. And you can get access to the cool channel badge and, of course, the channel emojis, all the cool custom emojis I make for you. So if any of the channel members want to show those emojis off and see what I've come up with, feel free, because I think I'm quite proud of them. Quite proud of some of them. Some of them are kind of silly, but thank you so much, Bellywood. I appreciate the support. Westside Girl Reacts is here. Good to see you. Surf as well, member of the Godless Army. Rabib is here. Something to listen to tonight. Awesome. Thank you so much, Rabib. Casey Cooper, member of the Godless Army. Thanks so much. Oh, and I appreciate that. It says JL smoked that 11 reasons evidence preacher like Boston Scrub. Appreciate that, bud. That was an easy one. He said, I have 11 evidences for God. And then no, it's absolutely not. But that was a fun one. Yeah, he's an easy one to debunk. Mr. E-Man's here, member of the Godless Army. Thanks so much for being here. Joshua Lee as well, and Charlie Welch, the only man on the internet you never make a bet with. Good to see you, Charlie. Thanks so much for being here. Both members of the Godless Army. Mr. E-Man is here, and I saw Mr. E-Man gifted 10 channel memberships. Thank you so much, Mr. E-Man. You rock. We really, really do appreciate that. Kel Cool J is here. Thanks so much. Lori Marie, member of the Godless Army. Rasheen is here. Good to see you, Rasheen. It says, hello, friends, but I don't speak Gaelic yet, but I appreciate the intro. Thank you so much, Rasheen. Exceptionally Average is here, member of the Godless Army. Casey Cooper, well met to you, sir. Jackalope Herdmaster is here. Good to see you, Jackalope. It's been forever. Cal Cool J. Up and Out is here. Good to see you. Minx, all the way from Australia. Thanks so much, Minx. How is it tomorrow? So appreciate that. Cal Cool J is a new member of the Godless Army. Thanks so much. Enjoy all the emojis and, of course, the channel badge. The channel badge being the expanding mind emoji, which means the longer you're with me, the more your mind expands. See what I did there? Thank you so much. Sumami is here. Good to see you, Sumami, and Fenton Mully and Fangirl98. Good to see y'all. Thanks so much for being here. And Turing Test 2, member of the Godless Army. And Edison Carter is in the house. Good to see you, Edison. Thanks so much for being here. So, Mink says tomorrow is sunny. Fantastic. That's good to hear. It's good to have that. Good to have that information. So thank you all so much for being here. So yes, we'll just go ahead and dive right in. I have a special guest tonight, and these conversations I don't get to have them too often because, unfortunately, as many individuals as I reach out to, many of them, for some reason, don't want to have a chat. And this individual, in one of his latest videos, or one of his most recent videos, put out it's like, hey, can you reach out? Let's have a talk. It's like, okay, cool. Someone who wants to have a talk. So we'll just give him a big warm welcome from the channel, Joe Ensley.
Hey, JL, thanks for having me on, man. Good to be
My
here.
pleasure. Thank you very, very much for coming out. It's nice. It was nice to finally get someone who's like, you were very, very open. You're like, yes, let's have a talk. Let's chat and everything. And most of the time, all I get is, well, I either get hell no, get away from me, or I get ghosted. Like,
well, I am sorry to hear that. I think that is really sad that people do that. And I've noticed that surprisingly, a lot of the atheist channels are full on like, hey, here's my email. Let's chat. Let's do this. And then the other side of the aisle seems to be a little quieter. I don't know what's wrong, but that's all right. I'm not that way.
And yes, as everybody can see, yes, Joe is a fellow beard aficionado. So we got good action here. We got good beards going on. This is nice. I like this. How long you been growing yours out? Because I've been doing about 2 years.
Oh, I would say, well, I trimmed it up pretty heavily not long ago. I do not do the Duck Dynasty scraggle. So when it gets there, got to chop. But I would say, let's see, 2020. Yeah, 2020, October 2020, I started growing. I haven't shaved it since. And yeah, as soon as I worked EMS for like 5 years. And so once I got to a place where there wasn't a guy with a white shirt telling me to shave my face, I'm like, I'm done shaving my face. So that was the end of that.
I same similar situation. I had to be clean shaven for forever. It was like 6.5 years when I worked for a prior company. I worked for a local convenience store chain. I worked in. Yeah, and I was like, I had to shave virtually every single day. But the day I left, I was like, I'm done. I stopped. I'm not touching a razor. Now I let it go, and it got actually much longer. And so that took almost about 3 years. But then I had to shave it because I don't know if you've ever, because I live very rurally, like really rural. And so I woke up one morning and have you ever found like a critter in your beard?
No, we have not gotten there yet.
So I woke up one morning and had a spider in my beard.
Oh.
And the two we have running rampant around here because we're so rural is we have wolf spiders, which get up to be about, large. And then we have brown recluses as well. Yeah. So, I was kind of like, so I only felt it kind of moving and I was like, what is that? What is that? And I kind of smashed it and I was like, okay. Nope. I don't know what this was, so I had to clean. So I took it all off. So I took it really short, and now I've let it grow out. And it was funny because when I first started growing out, I didn't know beard care. So but now I know how to handle it. Now I know how to take care of it, and that's a very important beard care. Very important, kids. Remember that.
Yes, it's as important as hygiene. But I really can't stand the whole beard thing and the anti-beard thing. And like, we don't tell women what to do with the hair on their legs, and then we think it's fine to tell guys what to do with the hair on their face. I'm like, hey, it grows there. Leave it alone.
It's crazy. The company that I worked for claimed that men could not have, they couldn't have sideburns that went below the tops of their ears,
right?
And they could not have facial hair other than a mustache. But it's shocking how many people just a mustache makes them look like serial killers.
Oh, dude, it's getting a van for free candy all day in the mustache world, dude. Well, I mean, I was in EMS, so all the firemen, all they can have is that one stash that fits under their oxygen regulator. And they all look like they're going to take your kids. It's terrifying.
It's wild. They justified it by saying that like beards they would say they would do like studies. Like they would send out like surveys to their customer base and be like, and the question is literally, do you find people with beards untrustworthy? And that's where they make the decisions. Like, yes, people with beards and people with tattoos, we find untrustworthy. So
haven't we figured out that the customer's always wrong? I mean, at this point, we know that is the truth.
Let it not be said that Joe and I didn't agree on something.
Yeah, we started in a great place.
In a fantastic place is that the customer is no,
they're always wrong.
Fantastic. So the atheist and the Christian can agree on something. So to just kind of kick everything off, if you want to give let the audience know kind of like who you are, what you do, what your channel is, and kind of give a breakdown as to kind of like what you do and what your goals are.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Joe Ensley, and I run the Gospelogian YouTube channel. My primary I'm in vocational ministry, so I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor for about heading up on 4 years now. And then my YouTube channel just kind of started as a place to put like preaching and teaching, and then it moved on to like answering questions and stuff. And then I'm guessing, actually, I don't know how I ended up here, but I could guess that path. One day I made a video about how to witness to an atheist, and that went completely nuts. And atheists heard that as me talking to them, and I came across kind of as a condescending jerk. So then I got some really cool conversations out of that, specifically with Godless Engineer, who ripped me a new one for that. And then he was nice because I'm like, bro, you can't do this. Like, we're going to do it live. And he's like, okay. And so that was good. And then I made a How to Witness to an Atheist Part 2 that was less condescending, yet still hated. And so it's funny because that's not even like my niche. I'm not like an apologist. I'm more like, I'm in the pastoring. That's kind of where I'm at. But anyway, I was in EMS for 5 years before I got into ministry, and now I'm here, and I actually love doing this. Like I said, I've done the real world thing. Like, I guess a lot of guys get out of seminary and they don't I'm sad they won't have these conversations, but I spent 5 years in EMS and spent time with all people of all kinds of beliefs. And I've always enjoyed the conversations, always at least enjoyed looking at the questions, because however you answer them, there are questions all of us do have to answer. And I'm pretty secure in believing that I think I know where the best answers are, but I'm happy to hear someone else's answers. And if they're willing to let me share mine, then I'd like to share that. But if not, I don't have to be an idiot about it either. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Awesome. So, just for my own clarification, do you what particular denomination? Or are you more non-denominational, or?
I'm on the non-denom side for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have any hard ties or affiliations.
Gotcha. And do you utilize a specific Bible, or do you like stick to a specific one, or kind of?
Well, here's actually a kind of fun background deal. I grew up worst kind of Christian you can imagine. Super abusive, spiritually, physically, all that. And that whole tribe went with one translation. This is the only one. And
that sounds like Baptist.
Oh, yeah. It was like independent fundamental Baptist, like bad kind. So I'm like, not again. So actually I had a really good friend who handed me a different translation. And now I switch translations all the time to make me get fresh, think about it a different way. It keeps me out of a rut. So no, actually I change a lot, much to the chagrin of people that listen to me. They're like, oh, what Bible are we buying this year? So, yeah.
That's interesting. So yeah, because I do a lot of coverage on the new IFB individuals like Stephen Anderson and Bruce Mejia. And of course, we
can agree on something else right there, right off the start. I'm sure of it.
And then, of course, Greg Locke and his nonsense, his deliverance ministry stuff that's currently going on, and not to mention all the gospel, the prosperity gospel preachers, Austin and Copeland and those cats. So
we're gonna have tons of things we agree on. See, we're in a great place. I can't stand any of those guys.
So yeah, so the big thing is that obviously the reason I want to have these conversations is not. Because there's a lot of things. Obviously, there's a lot of things that go into this. That go into this kind of deal. Now, there is a fracturing in this nation that I perceive. Okay. That what I have seen, given the rise of what the media would kind of call the Christian right, or the conservative Christian movement, in the sense that we have this push to influence legislation, to target specific minority groups, and to scapegoat them for many of the problems that we have. And we are seeing that in both Congress, both federally and locally, in local government, specifically in states like Tennessee and Florida and Texas. Okay. So as a Christian, as a kind of a representative of the faith, not the representative, but a representative, kind of, Groundhog Day on that. Okay. How do you view this? How do you approach it in that respect?
Okay, well, I'm actually probably going to be in the minority on my views on this. I really am not a big fan of all that. You cannot legislate morality. You can't do it. And specifically that group of people that's going to want to push really hard that right wing. I'm very libertarian politically. I think that you should stay in your house and do your thing, and I should stay in my house and do my thing. And the government should be as tiny as possible to protect us from international threats. And that's the end of the story for me. And then I do like to separate the religious side and the political side. So I have no place for that hardcore right wing that comes in there holding their Bibles, just misrepresenting the entire thing. In fact, if you're going to win people over to your side, the Bible says the kindness of the Lord leads to repentance, not the militancy of the people in their political views. So I'm not a big fan of that at all. Also, America's just not mentioned in the Bible. So yeah, I'm really not a big fan of any of that stuff at all. I don't think that helps the case personally. And this probably is not going to get along with a lot of people. I think we're a fully pagan heathen nation, like full gone. Like if there were principles of the Bible that our nation was founded on, but even if you look at Thomas Jefferson's Bible, he ripped out all the parts he didn't like. For me, that's not Christianity, dude. Like, don't even claim it at that point. You're done. Like, just say you want to make up your own way and go do it. And America's just gone completely away from what I would see as Christianity. And so I don't see any redemptive value in trying to legalistically force it back by making my beliefs law for everyone else. I don't see that as the path to fix anything at all.
Interesting. This is an interesting position, and I think you would at this point in time right now. I think there was a time when your position wouldn't be the minority, but I think that you are in the minority as of right now, simply because okay, now I could be completely wrong in this. It's total speculation on my part. But from what I'm seeing is that we are seeing an across the board decline in religious ideology, and especially, like hardcore religious ideology. Organized religion is declining in favor of either deism or atheism, or you could say agnosticism, but we can get into that later.
Yeah.
But it comes off that this feels to me like the kind of the last gasp, whereas Christianity, having declined so much in the Eastern Hemisphere, is now slowly becoming this they're trying to turn America into the last bastion of Christendom. It's like, this is it. This is the final battleground. That's why it's become so loud and so, in my opinion, egregious in their actions and in the legislation they're trying to pass, and trying to basically essentially turn us into a theocracy.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's an insecure position. If you do believe God is sovereign, if you do believe God is doing what he's doing, and you do look at it, I mean, well, okay. And like I said, I'm gonna come at this from my perspective, and I don't need to even make this an issue, but biblically, you cannot reconcile abortion and Christianity at the same place. And the majority of our country supports abortion. So you can't expect as a Christian, you can't be like, oh, we're Christians and we got to return to Christians while you're doing abortion. This is completely inconsistent with your beliefs. Just hang it up. Let the country go do what the country is going to do. You're not going to convince them a different way. And if you are serving a king whose kingdom spans all nations and all tribes and everything, then why are you so worried about this one little place and what's happening on it and why they're doing that, when the Bible already tells you pagans gonna do what pagans gonna do, dude? Like, that's how that's going to go down. And so it's our job to follow our shepherd where he leads us. And then obviously we would want to tell people about what's going on with what we've got going on. But I'm not a big fan of that hardcore conservative right, the way that's going. And I would say I am thrilled that Christianity and that label is becoming less and less across the board. There has been so much fake Christianity for years and years and years and years and years. And people that say they're Christians, like, okay, the Bible says go to church. So you say you're a Christian, you ain't been to church in 6 months. Dude, get off my roster, bro. That is not at all what this was about. So don't claim it. And the fact that people, like, I ministered in a church outside Portland, Oregon for a year. And man, I would rather deal with a bunch of people out in Portland, Oregon, which are doing Portland, Oregon things, than a bunch of right-wing people in suits in like the South or something. That drove me nuts. I'm like, at least the Portland people are honest. They're like, no, we're not Christians. We don't do any of that. We don't believe any of that. I think you've had so many fakers for so long saying, oh, we're Christians. And then they've been jerks. They've had non-Christ-like attitudes. They've been idiots about things, and they try to enforce their stuff on others. That's not what Christianity was about. So please just stop calling yourself that and go away. We should be in the minority. We are. The Bible says Christians are in the minority. So let's just be honest about that.
So this is interesting because you have a very specific, and I would say almost kind of like niche view of Christianity, what Christianity is. You derive it from the Bible. So obviously, individuals are on the other side of this. And the reason I bring this up is because it's a major thing. It's like in the Bible, it talks about rebuking those who speak falsely in the name. And so like stand up and say, like, if someone is doing wrong in the name of God, then you need to call them out. So you need to do it publicly. You need to do it loudly so that other people aren't deceived. So I get that.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't see a lot of that. And I think it's because Christians fear from the kind of view that they're all on the same side. Well, we all accept Christ. We all accept the resurrection. So we don't need more infighting, because the more infighting in Christianity, the worse it looks for the whole thing. So,
yeah.
I think that's why there's less calling out than there should be.
But they don't actually accept biblical Jesus and biblical God, right? Okay. So one thing, a great quote on this, Bodhi Bakum, I don't know if you've heard of him. He says that the 11th commandment in modern day Christianity is thou shalt be nice. And everyone's willing to break the other 10 to keep that one. And I think that's a heinous problem. Like, that's not what God told you to do. Just do what God told you to do. So yeah, I'm going to head straight for like biblical Christianity. And maybe that is a niche view probably. And I saw somebody ask, who decides who's a true Christian? Well, God has to wear the black and white striped shirt and blow the whistle on that one for sure. But there are certain identifiers you should be able to see in Christianity, and that is a tiny minority.
You see, and that's intriguing because if you and I've spoken to many individuals on the other side of that fence who will claim, like individuals like Greg Locke, individuals like the really hardcore Baptist Pentecostal, pastors snakes and, tongues and stuff. And it all really comes down to the problem of hermeneutics. And there's, it's the interpretations that you have of the Bible and how you can judge.
Greg Locke is a dumpster fire, and he couldn't spell hermeneutics. So let's just go ahead and say that ain't even there.
This is true. Like, for example, his whole deliverance doctrine is demonstrably not biblical. But he derives it from. So we can look at it and be like, it's a giant leap of logic to get this type of ministry from the Bible. But there are varying. We do have over 6 families of Christianity, over 40,000 denominations exist, that have developed over time within Protestantism. And the question then is, the problem of hermeneutics still exists. It's like, how do you justify one particular version of one particular interpretation? Because you start and you've got the Hebrew text, going back, and then even then the originals are lost. The vast majority of the Dead Sea Scrolls were demonstrated to be fakes. So you kind of go, so you got the Dead Sea Scrolls, you got Aramaic, you got Syrian Aramaic, dead languages. Then you've got Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, and then you've got the Septuagint, Greek. And then you've got the Latin Vulgate, you've got New Latin, and then the translation into English, the problems with the KJV, with the 1611, and so on and so forth. So through all of this, over all these years, how do you, how would you presume that you have solved the problem of hermeneutics?
Okay. That would be an incredibly arrogant claim. So I'm just going to say no. But what you can look at over time, and the Bible talks about contending for a faith that got passed down. And so if you look at church history, we can go back and see what these guys were saying. Obviously, you've got the biblical literature, but then you've got church history that follows along. And there are pretty much solid agreed upon theological issues all throughout church history. Most of the great names that we recognize in Christianity, they all had very similar beliefs. Now, there were little differences here and there. And that comes down to things like baptism and are we sprinkling or are we dunking? But the little minutia, the little things, they all believed in the main thing being the same way. And so actually you can look at church history and you can track a set of beliefs that have been very consistent throughout, and certain doctrines and theologies and understanding of God, like the Trinity. So if you got a denomination that's denying the Trinity that calls themselves Christians, they are now completely off brand of church history. So I don't know if we want to classify that anymore, but I'd say if you're not affirming the Trinity, which for those of you that really don't care about this and don't know, that's 3 persons in one God. If you deny that, then you're not in biblical Christianity anymore. So I think the widespread of denominations and things like that don't scare me at all, because I recognize that there's going to be one similar set of beliefs, and most denominations, there's several denominations that are all pretty much in the same camp. So I go to a church that doesn't sprinkle babies. We baptize people when they say they believe. Great. But I could go to a church that sprinkles baby and not have too bad of a problem with it at all, as long as their main doctrine was aligned. The essentials of the faith and the non-essentials need to be sorted on that.
Okay. So, but that kind of goes to the, Christians believe that we all have the kind of the same core ideas. So it's okay if we're kind of if we kind of demarcate, or if we kind of break apart where we fall on other smaller issues. But the core issues, the core tenets, as long as we hold to those. Many times it's
preference. How many churches have decided, well, we don't want to do the new music, we'd like to do old music. Well, that's an area of preference, not an area of biblical doctrine. But wham, now we have 2 churches in town instead of 1. You replicate that over a few thousand years, and it's why are there all these different churches? Well, some of it's convictional, some of it's preferential, and some of it's hermeneutical. But then, like I said, there's a bunch of people that don't even worry about the hermeneutics, and people have been using the Bible for their own gain for a very long time. And atheists and Christians can unite together on that, where if you're telling a poor person to write yourself a check of $10,000 so that they can get to heaven, then I don't care what church you're from. That's just wrong, dude. Whether you're buying a stained glass window for your Catholic church, or whether you're just lining your own pockets for a jet like Kenneth Copeland, I got the big problem with, taking advantage of people either way. But that's been happening for a long time.
So, and you mentioned in that, that then my question would then be, there are ones that stick out as obvious to us. They're obviously not, we could say that they don't represent what Christianity is attempting to represent. And then there are some that I'd say there may be some argumentation there, but really comes down to methodology. So by what methodology would you be able to determine which version is either as close to correct as possible or the correct one? Or does such a methodology exist?
Well, I'm just going to go straight back to the Bible on that. I believe in biblical Christianity. So if they're closely following the Bible, teaching the Bible, and practicing the Bible, and they try to understand the Bible as it was written with a good set of hermeneutics. And honestly, we had an exchange student one time that was really not sure how to handle a Bible study in youth group. And what I ended up explaining to her was good hermeneutics, good exegetical principles in the Bible are the same that you're learning in your English class. When you pick up a book off your library and you try to understand what did the author mean to say by this, those should be the same principles people are using. Like this is common for all literary genres. How we determine what was meant by what was written. There's pretty acceptable standards for that across all professions, like what genre of literature are we in? Is this poetry? Then we know how we interpret poetry. Is it narrative? Then we have a different way of understanding narrative. And so many churches throw all that out the window, just off the bank. So I'm going to say if they're following biblical Christianity and they're trying to understand and apply the Bible as it was written and going for what it was meant by what was written, then we're probably going to be in a broad-based camp that's going to be pretty acceptable.
And see, it's interesting because determining how you approach each verse or each chapter or even each book individually, do you approach Genesis with the same idea in your head or the same concept in your head as you would approach Job or Acts or any of the Gospels themselves? Are any inherently more important than the others? Are they all of equal value? And then you look at things. It's hard to determine. Like I said, is there a methodology to determine that? Because it seems like what should be interpreted as poetic, what should be interpreted as metaphorical, what should be interpreted literally, all seems arbitrarily assigned, depending upon the agenda of the denomination itself.
That can happen, unfortunately, and that is a regular thing. But most of the time, the writings themselves tell you what genre they're in. I mean, you look at all the epistolary literature in the New Testament, they all say, "Hi, it's me. I'm writing a letter." Ta-da! We have a letter on our hands here, guys. Hi, this is what happened this year. Ta-da! Historical narrative. Most of the writings just tell you what genre they are straight up. And so you've got like one of your mainline apologists, William Lane Craig. I can't stand the guy. If you're going to throw out like the whole first book of the Bible, don't pretend to defend the rest of it. And he's like, well, it doesn't really mean what it says it means. And I'm like, no, it means what it says it means if you're going to follow it biblically. And so there are a bunch of people that just trash that. But I think most of them are pretty self-evident when you just look at them and they tell you what genre they are.
So that's interesting. So you adhere to the book of Genesis as literally.
Well, if you're not going to, you probably shouldn't even pretend to adhere to any of the Bible, right?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, I think that goes down to, it goes down to a combination of like philosophy of truth and epistemology. So okay. we can look at like when the book was written and, look at the time over which the 66 books of the Bible were written. So over a long period of time, and then juxtapose it against like other holy texts, like the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao, the Egyptian coffin text, so on and so forth. And so we look at this and we look at what the people who wrote them, the tools that they had available to them when they were writing them. Now, we know that all ancient holy texts, every single one of them across the world, they all make reference to real places. Okay. But this does not necessarily indicate that anything that they say in the book is true or any of the major claims are true. So that applies equally to all of them. So the same that we would say for the Quran, we would say, even though the Quran makes mention of legitimate cities and stuff like that, in history, we can't say that we wouldn't say that well, that means Allah exists. That doesn't follow that, it mentions, Mecca or it mentions a particular city. That means that Allah is real. So we can't make that logical leap. So when we look at like Genesis and we look at that interpretation at the time that Genesis was written, it's, the first book of the Bible, it's ancient Hebrew mythology. And that respect, because that's all we can really classify it as, because it's making scientific claims that we know now from the evidence we have available to us that we cannot conclude that any of that is true. That it was that the best explanation for why it's written like that is that these were ancient individuals trying to make sense of the things that they were observing. Humans on the earth making observations about reality, and without access to the technology that we have today, all they can do is come. I was like, well, this is what I think it is. No different than the Romans, no different from the Greeks, no different from the Germanic tribes that existed in the East or existed in the West. Everybody was doing it. Japan, China, the Aboriginals 60,000 years ago, still making the same, just making observations. And that's why they're also different around the world, because different observations around the world from the different countries they were in. So there's a justification for not holding to that, but still looking at the Gospels and saying, hey, there's at least a decent message here.
Okay, so this is quickly going to turn into a Genesis apologetics video, and I'm not sure I want to go down that whole road. But yes, I hold the Genesis literally historical. I don't see that as mythology. I see that as historical narrative. But also understanding that everybody's dealing with a faith-based system. And so we talk about, well, we've got evidence that proves this a different way. Well, actually, no. We don't have a scientist that was there when your Big Bang and evolution happened. We haven't reproduced evolution, or at least on a macro species-to-species level. We have not reproduced that in a lab. We are trusting these people who say they know how it is because of what they've interpreted. And that is one faith-based system. My faith-based system says I'm trusting the guy who said he was there and said he did it all based on other things I've got going on too. Inspired book of the Bible, just equally as important as the rest of it.
Okay, so obviously, by stating that somebody wasn't there to watch these things happen, obviously nobody was there to see God create anything. So that goes both ways.
That's why I say both are faith-based roads were taken here, because
well, it's not faith-based in cosmology, and the reason it's not faith-based is because while we start, obviously in science, we start with an observation and then we ask a question about a particular thing. But there's what we eventually get to is over the past 6,000 years, human beings since Mesopotamia, human beings have developed very, very strict and precise methodologies for determining what is true, for eliminating bias, for ensuring that we can repeat this and get as close to the truth as possible. That's how we form our scientific theories. Scientific theories being a model that best explains a phenomena given the abundance of evidence that we have.
Sure.
Now, looking at that, cosmology is the field that centers around that. And then we can make predictions. Basically, we look at if what we understand about the Big Bang being true, about Big Bang cosmology being true, the initial inflation event of then we can make novel testable predictions that come true, which therefore verify our interpretation of the evidence. To say that, yes, that is the correct way to interpret the evidence because the prediction you made came true and it provided new information to the model. So we can do that. Novel testable predictions are what is most important. So we have access to it, we can test it, and then we eliminate our bias, we peer review it. It goes through strict peer review, but just in case, we continuously test it over and over and over and over. We keep trying to poke holes in it, and we have yet to knock it down. And theories improve, and they become more accurate as more evidence comes in. So we have that evidence, novel testable predictions. But we can't do that if we take with what the Bible is true. Then those predictions come out false. Those predictions come out wrong.
Okay.
So there is a kind of a demarcation there.
Well, we'd have to look at what predictions we're talking about. But even, the issue with that right there is the original flat earthers were the science people. And in fact, religious and science was mixed, which was a terrible, terrible deal. But they had the flat earth theory. And then very quickly, Galileo and all these guys come along. They're like, wait a minute, this is not working. Adapt here. We're going to change this. And so,
going back to like Aristophanes and ancient Greece, when it was kind of like, oh wow, and looking at water, looking at the shadows in a well, it's like oh, two sticks. It's obviously
the 2 sticks was great when they figured that out. They're like, wait a minute, there's got to be
Eratosthenes. Sorry, Eratosthenes. My bad to anybody. I didn't mean to Greek names. So.
But yeah, so you look at that, and then so we say, okay, now it's 2023, and we know we for sure have it right. Okay, well, they thought for sure they had it right too, and when you're dealing with an issue of creation, we don't have someone that was there. We do have things that the scientific rules seem to change when it comes to dealing with creationists and that sort of thing. As soon as every atheist I know has asked me, you've got to give me one piece of evidence. And that's almost not a conversation worth having because they're not going to accept any evidence that you would produce.
Well, that's if it is evidence. Well, before we dive into that, what in your own, what in your words is evidence?
Well, for me, the argument goes along the lines like this. So let's say, you had a teenage son and he told you he picked up the new sport of splorping, and you've never heard of splorping. You don't know what splorping is. You've never done splorping. Great. And you say, well, son, you were out till 2 a.m. last night. What were you doing? And he says, well, I was out splorping. And you say, well, I need you to prove to me that you were out splorping. And you go out he takes you to your front porch, and all the houses in your neighborhood are green. And he says, this is what splorping is. It's painting all the houses in your neighborhood green. And you'd say, well, a painter could have painted them green. There's any other unimaginable ways that this could have been, that these houses were painted green. You're going to reject your son's evidence in a story for why he was splorping. And no, he's saying the only evidence I got for splorping is that we painted the houses green, and that's what it is. And now the houses are green. And
well, so right. But I mean, just to clarify, you understand why we reject that, right? Because it's just hearsay.
But it's the only evidence he has what he says it is.
Okay, but we could have access to other evidence. So we you are correct, yes. So obviously hearsay would be bad evidence. That would not be sufficient as evidence. I agree with you on that.
This is a witness testimony. This is a guy telling you what he did, and it depends on. It's going to come down to how much you trust your kid. Honestly, I think in that analogy. So for me, what it comes down to is God has said that the evidence for His creation is declared by His creation. The design of our universe and the obvious design of our universe shows us that there is a creator. He says, the heavens declare my glory to creation. I made man in my image. And we say, because we've never been splorping before, we say, well, I'm not made in God's image. I'm made in whatever image man is. I evolved into this image. And so we're going to reject all the evidence God says that He gives us for creation. So it's kind of an unfair argument.
You got to see that makes some assumptions, though. That makes some hard assumptions, because it's not that God says this and then I say no. It is the claim is God is saying this. Well, where did I hear the claim? I heard the claim from another person. So they are saying splorping. And then I'm saying, well, can you prove that to me? Or is there evidence for this? And they say, yes, here is the evidence. It is in this book. Okay, well, how do I know that you didn't just write the book yourself and say that? And then they say, oh, no.
The historicity of the Bible and the number of authors.
But going down the train of thought is like, well, then you could say, well, no, it's a very old book and it was written over a long period of time. But you see that these are more claims, that the claims keep piling upon each other. And I can't verify any of that. I can't say, well, let me go talk to the author. Well, sorry, the author's dead. Okay, well, how do I know the author was inspired by this, or the author didn't just think they were inspired? So that's what it goes down to epistemology, is how we know things and how we can determine things to be true.
We will make those assumptions when it comes down to things like evolution. Like I said, we haven't seen a change of kind to kind, a change of kind over. We haven't seen macroevolution. We won't observe it, but yet we have people that tell us it happened. It just took millions of years, and we're like, well, how do we know that you didn't just write the book on that? All of a sudden, those arguments seem to very quickly.
But we have evidence. I mean, I've been and seen the long-term evolutionary experiment. That's like 80,000. Actually, no, it's like 120,000 generations in now. And then, of course, we have McMaster's University, where the planet simulator is going on, but that's working towards abiogenesis. And then, of course, but evolution is absolutely true. Now, when we say micro, just to make sure that
we've seen the half monkey, half man.
No, because that's not what evolution is. That's the important thing. It's like that's what I run into. No,
from one kind to another.
No. That's what's wrong. That's what I've run into a bunch. That creationists seem to have a false interpret or a false sense of what evolution is, how evolution works, and what evolution entails. So evolution itself doesn't occur to individuals. Evolution occurs in populations. Sure. So the best way I can break it down is that if you have a population of 4 million dragonflies, and then the dragon 4 million, then all of a sudden some evolutionary pressure occurs that splits, that divides the population into 2 million and 2 million. And then one is driven further north and one is driven further south. So the ones in the north go up where it's cold, and the ones in the south go where it's warmer. Okay. So their morphology in the populations, because no two organisms are identical, because there's no they're not cookie cutters. Okay. So each individual will have genes that express slightly differently than the other. Some will have shorter wings, some will have longer wings, but there will be kind of a range. And the same is true for the southern population as well. But because it's colder, then shorter, thicker wings might be what works better in cold weather, whereas in the hot weather, the longer, slender wings may help us. So eventually, as generations go, and we've seen this in especially in dragonflies, that because their generations are so fast and they breed so quickly, that eventually you'll get these morphological changes, and eventually over time you get two individual species of dragonfly that was one and is now two. Speciation has occurred, and eventually it goes on long enough, this one species of dragonfly will no longer be able to interbreed with the other species anymore, or even with its parent species anymore. So that's what evolution is. It's the gradual change in time from the selection of specific alleles, the negative or positive selection of alleles over time. So it occurs in populations, but not to individuals.
I was talking macroevolution.
Okay, so micro and macro are referring to time scales. They're referring to time scales. But what I found, having worked in evolutionary biology, micro and macro are talking about time scales. They're essentially the same thing. The mechanism is still the same, but they're talking about the time scales that they take place on. Whereas microevolution is typically within 1 to 3 generations, and macroevolution is anything 3 and beyond. Okay. But what I found, see, this seems very, very simple. It's like, well, yeah, it's still the same mechanism, just one takes place quickly. But what I found is that individuals like Sanford and Behe and a number of others, what they've done is they've taken micro and they have rebranded it, or they've taken adaptation, genetic adaptation, which is something individuals do, and they've rebranded it as micro, and that's not correct. And I've corrected a number of them on a few of it, simply because it's like, no. When you present the information incorrectly, you're going to get a bad conclusion. So it's important to know the specific terms we're talking about. Just like, for example, John C. Sanford, his genetic entropy. Genetic entropy is not a thing. He literally took error catastrophe and rebranded it. And error catastrophe is not a thing that happens. It's like we literally tried to induce error catastrophe in the lab, and it fails because that's not how genetics works. But John Sanford believes the Earth is 6,000 years old, so he's got to push this young Earth creationist narrative. And so that's why it's important to understand like where these things are coming from, like like how the rebranding of terms in order to push specific narratives from like Answers in Genesis or Ken Ham or any of these cats who want to make you believe that Tyrannosaurus Rexes were on the ark,
But somehow you've still got to get from a single cell organism to a human.
Yes. Yeah. So that's evolution. So we got evolution and we've got abiogenesis. And abiogenesis, you look at things like the Miller-Urey experiment and a lot. Now, we don't know specifically what version of abiogenesis, but we know that was how it came about. We just don't know which version, because knowing to a T what the conditions were like on primordial Earth like 3 billion years ago, very, very hard. So we can try and get close to it, and we're trying. That's what McMaster University is doing with the Planet Simulator. But we know it's kind of like we have a jigsaw puzzle, right? And we have good portions of it, but we're missing some sections. And the effort to fill in those sections is long, boring, and arduous. But we're slowly but surely doing it. But we have an idea of what the picture is. It's like, okay, we just don't know specifically which one it was. But the question then comes, with the evidence going in one direction, evolution being observable, like we've watched it, we've actually induced it, and we utilize it. So it's artificial selection. Artificial selection is what we do to crops, animals, all the advancements in medicine and animal husbandry and in agriculture. Those advancements were all possible because of our because of our implicit understanding of evolution. So then the question comes, the evidence goes one direction. Here is evolution. The hypothesis goes abiogenesis, working hypothesis. The question then for you the evidence is going one way. Do you still think that a God concept and abiogenesis / evolution are mutually exclusive concepts?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd say they're mutually exclusive. And I'd say anybody that tries to split the line does so at the expense of scripture. And I'm not okay with that. So the pieces of the puzzle that are missing in the evolutionary model are huge pieces to me and present large problems. And then also you say we have evidence.
Can you elaborate? It's like such as?
Well, we keep saying we have evidence for evolution. And I keep saying First of all, I don't see those transitions between kinds, like fish to bird.
Well, that's because you're using kinds, and kinds is not a scientific term. I don't know why creationists keep using that term, because it's way too broad. Kind is so broad, because when you think of it, here's the best way to think of it. Why kind doesn't work is because dinosaurs, phylogenetically, were a kind of combination of avian, of birds, reptiles, and mammals.
Okay.
So, like, genetically, they were a combination of those three things. Okay. So, and dinosaurs were even more diverse than what we have currently on the planet today. So, because that's 360 million years of evolution. Human beings, modern Homo sapiens, been around like 200,000 or 250,000. Okay. So, what we're looking at is that kind is too broad, which is why we look at phylogenetics and phylogeny and taxonomy, and we have extremely precise indicators as to what determines where one organism falls. Like, we are Homo sapiens, we are members of the Homo genus, which incorporates like 13 other individuals. Then we are all members of the family Hominidae, and Hominidae includes us, Pan, gorilla, pongo, and then Hominidae is a part of primates, which includes us and all those, and and so on and so forth. So it's important to recognize that it's not kinds. We have more precise terminology, better terminology to describe
actually
these
less
things.
Precise. What you're doing is including larger groups of kinds into bigger categories to make it work. It's actually less specific. Kinds.
Oh, no, because that's the conclusion from the genetics. Phylogenetics is what gets us there.
Right, but I'm saying that's actually less specific because we're including more different kinds in that group. So, okay, climate change.
Well, no, it just means that it just means that kinds don't exist. That there isn't a thing as a kind because of that common ancestry. That kinds is inappropriate to apply because kinds, the term kinds, if you look at it from the concept when human beings came up with it, observing the world around us, we see birds, snakes, fish, humans, monkeys, horses, whatever. And we say they all look different. So they all are their own kind. But we realize that's an old observation. That's an old conclusion from an old observation. But now that we're further along and we have phylogenetic trees, we understand island biogeography, we understand vestigiality, we understand homology, and we understand how morphology changes, we understand evolution, then we realize once we start mapping these things out, wow, they're not that separate. They're just they're the end states of that particular evolutionary niche. And so, like, when you said like the ape man, that wouldn't be true, because modern apes, modern chimps, gorillas, and orangutans did not exist 60 million years ago. And Homo sapiens, us, we didn't exist 60 million years ago, but our common ancestor did. And so then there was a branch off where gorillas went in one direction, and then a branch off where chimps and orangutans went in another direction, and then a branch where orangutans went off, then like chimps went off, and then bonobos went off, and then we went off. Slowly but surely. And those are those morphological changes that take place over time that we observed when we talked about the dragonflies earlier.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing this as a semantic change where instead of arguing about different genders, we just say, well, genders is an old idea. They don't exist, so we're just not playing that game. And that's what I see happening with this. Well, we can't play the kinds game. We can't show you between kinds. So we're just going to change terminology and say there's a split. Let's say we're going with the evolutionary theory, and we've got a climate change problem. And our world is slowly being destroyed, and this is really sad. We're all heating up, and we're all going to die. Is that not sufficient atmospheric and environmental pressure to trigger my new deep evolutionary model where I should start being ready to go to Mars, dude? Like, I should
because remember, evolution doesn't occur to an individual. You can adapt to particular.
We all should be adapting to move.
No. We can adapt. Like, for example, because of my genetics. Okay, we're all human beings, but we all have different adaptations because mine come from Europe and the Isles. Okay. Whereas, so if you look at genetic adaptation is merely things like cold tolerance, dietary tolerance, length of bone, density of muscle, length of hair. So these are the things, these are like adaptations. So like, for example, individuals like us who hail from Europe, from the northern areas of Europe, then we can grow hair like many other human beings, like many other humans can't. You know, we don't get patchy beards. If I let my top hair grow out, it's like wool. Okay, well, there's a reason for that. There's a reason it gets thick and it like sits hard. There's a reason for that. But there's also a reason like why I'm more cold tolerant than many tropical human civilizations where they cannot tolerate the cold at all. Sure. You know, I had a chance to be on a catamaran once in Hawaii with a family from Scotland, and it was 72 degrees out, and they were freaking dying. And I'm like, this is gorgeous. Right. There's a reason for that. Those adaptations occur in individuals, yes, and they're passed down as we breed. But evolution itself would happen to the population. Now, climate change and the steady warming of the planet, the dumping of CO2 into the atmosphere, and the steady warming of the planet, climate change is an evolutionary pressure on our species. Okay. Like, for example, polar bears will likely go extinct in the next 50 years. And the reason for that is because of the lack of Arctic ice, because polar bears are so specialized. They've evolved because they've been much longer, you know, going back to days like the short-faced bear. So polar bears are so specialized that any major change in their environment will result in their death. Sure. Same with pandas. Pandas highly specialized. Koalas highly specialized. And so human beings are really adaptable, but you make the planet too hot, many of us will die out because we simply can't tolerate that in a very small portion. So imagine that if we did increase the temperature of the planet and it didn't wipe out all humans, but wiped out most because, you know, access to resources or whatever, but just heat tolerance, then you wind up with humans who are exceptionally heat tolerant. And then those go forward and breed, and then you wind up with a variation of human beings that is wildly different from the ones before the climate change take place. That is evolution.
And over the millions of years we've been around, the chances of environmental changes happening that would wipe out pretty much most of the life on Earth, the chances of that happening are kind of astronomical. But yet somehow we dodged all that.
Well, very well. There were a couple of close calls. Like the most close call, obviously, was the Toba eruption about 70,000 years ago. Okay. So when the Toba eruption took place, that resulted in a genetic bottleneck of human beings, where humanity itself was reduced down to the estimate is about 17,000 individuals on the planet, because the Toba eruption was beyond. It was ostensibly the only thing worse than Toba would be a super volcano eruption like Yellowstone going on. Okay, sure. So Toba was bad. There's evidence for Toba all over the place. We can trace that back. We know it implicitly. And when we trace our genealogy, we trace it back and we see a bottleneck at the time that Toba took place. So that eruption nearly wiped us out completely. Only by virtue of luck of us having spread to very specific area, like very, niche area, very, very specific areas on the planet, were we able to survive that. And we fortunately did, and we bred out there. But that's where that genetic bottleneck comes from. If that genetic bottleneck had never occurred, we would be wildly different, because we don't know what morphologies were lost when virtually all of humanity almost went extinct. So, and of course, an asteroid could do it again. If there's another one that hits the planet, if it's a sizable enough one, we could have another Chicxulub event, or a Carrington event. Who knows? But okay. when it comes down to it, it's important to remember that evolution takes place in populations, in populations. Adaptation is what occurs with individuals, and their adaptive ability is what they've evolved. So the less adaptable, the ones that die, the ones that are more adaptable are the ones that continue to survive. So our adaptability is a result of our evolution.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like this is bit of a dead trail for us, but we could continue going down.
Yeah, the important thing is that it's about what we know and where the evidence goes. Okay. So because when you whether you go back to the Bible or whether you look at it or not, I don't know, and it's entirely up to you. But we go where the evidence goes, because that's our epistemology. Is like, what can we verify? What can we determine? What do we have access to? What are the tools that we have available to us to work with? And so trying to like Francis. I don't know if you're familiar with Francis S. Collins. Do you know who that is?
Nope.
So Francis S. Collins was the head of the Human Genome Project, and he was the director of the NIH at Bethesda for 16 years, and he is a devout Christian.
Okay.
His story of, like, I read in his book, The Language of God. His conversion moment was he was walking like in December out in the woods, and he came across a stream that had frozen in three lines. It's like, and he took it, just him emotionally took it as like a symbol of the Trinity, and he became a Christian shortly thereafter. But this individual has a profound understanding of evolution, of genetics, of how these things work, of how we use them in society, how we make predictions with them. One of the leading individuals how we were able to map the human genome and get the information we need from there. And he's a devout Christian because he understands that these two concepts are not mutually exclusive, that evolution could most certainly be the means by which his God diversified life. Abiogenesis could absolutely be the way his God instantiated life, because utilizing what's in the environment, the God just utilized what was there. And that's why the evidence points to that. And so that makes sense. The God is there, it makes this, it uses what is available, and then it makes life. And it's like, wow. And so he's able to marry these two.
Right.
And because he understands they're not mutually exclusive. But he also says, in a direct quote from him, is that to get to God, you cannot use reason and logic. Reason and logic will never get you to a God. It requires faith.
Wow.
Is that something that you agree with or disagree with?
Well, I think I agree with it. So he's a theistic evolutionist, and that's I'm happy for him. So we are justified by faith alone. That's pretty clear in the Bible. If I'm going to be saved and born again, that's going to happen through faith, and that faith is going to be a gift of God by his grace. I don't think that means I need to concede that we have a blind faith that ignores reason and logic. And I mean, you're probably very well versed and familiar with the classic philosophical arguments for God that use reason and logic to point to at least a God, maybe not the God of the Bible, but at least getting you to a God, where they'd use the cosmological arguments, the teleological argument. Those things are using logic and ration to get you to a God. Maybe not the God of the Bible, but at least a God. So I'm not going to concede that we don't use ration and logic, but actually to come to an understanding of the God of the Bible, yes, there's going to be some faith involved. But that doesn't mean you've turned off the logic and ration.
Okay, so it's entirely possible. So with Francis Collins' position and his understanding of things, that was his profession, that's what he went into, it's what he utilized, that's what his job was. So, and his conclusion is how he had to reconcile these two things, is understanding that they're not mutually exclusive concepts. A God can exist. Evolution and abiogenesis can still be true, because those could be the means by which the God, attained what it wanted. And the Bible itself, while possessing a good message, if you take certain parts of it, the Bible itself is not technically necessary, because he recognizes these things. Well, the Bible is a good message, but there's a lot of stuff that we could argue is really, really bad in the Bible. It's like not good, that we probably could do without, like a lot of Levitical laws, where we're putting people to death for the slightest, for like looking at us wrong. I think we could do away with those, and some of the genocide and some of the whatever, because the Israelites needed to justify why they were waging war with their neighbors, in the Fertile Crescent. Take it easy, Casey Cooper. He's got to go. Thank you so much, bud. Have a good night. Thank you for coming in. By the way, real quick, anybody who sends in a super chat, I am starring those. If you have questions, you can tag me to make sure that I see those. Or if you want to send them in a super chat, I will star those, and we will get to those towards the end of it. So I just want to make sure I'm not skipping anybody. I see them, and I'm just making note of them. And by the way, before I forget, Casey Cooper. Oh man, I missed him. I lost him because we had some milestone chats come in. From Casey Cooper and somebody else. I missed him. I'm so sorry, and unfortunately I can't pull him back on my phone. So I appreciate those milestone chats. Thank you all so very, very much.
Do we need to catch up with any questions before we keep going?
No, I want to save him. I want to save him towards the end in case, because so that we don't jump back and forth and like that. So you bring up faith. Okay, and I'm assuming your faith alone, not faith and works.
Oh yeah, faith alone all day.
Faith alone. Okay, so faith alone. So, but there are some problems with faith.
Okay.
So, for example, the way when I do these stages on occasion where we bring up Christians and believers and talk to them, faith in of itself. So, faith can be. Would you agree that faith can be misplaced?
Yeah. A lot of people have faith in all sorts of things that's misplaced. Yeah, all the time.
So
Nazis and Hitler. Example A. Bad place to put your faith, boys.
Godwin's law. So, can faith be manipulated?
Well, we need to talk about what kind of faith we're getting. So I'm going to distinguish faith. I'm going to distinguish the faith that is a gift from God by his grace and then just normal people having faith. I mean, there are people that have faith that Elvis is still alive. That is not faith that came to them by the grace of God unto salvation. Now, that is just their faith. So we're going to have to distinguish the two different kinds of faith. Yes, faith can be manipulated, not necessarily the faith that comes by the grace of God, but faith can be.
So God gives this faith?
Yes.
Okay. Where do you are you deriving that from a specific verse in the Bible?
Yeah, sure. Ephesians 2:8-9. By grace are you saved through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. So we just cut works out of the table, and it's by grace I'm saved through faith. So where's this faith come from? Faith comes from God.
Okay, I have to admit, I have never heard that interpretation. I've never heard anybody interpret the words that way, that it's always been a matter of with faith, with grace being the focus, the grace of God being the focus, having faith in that grace. And
I'll never have faith in God except for his grace. Until he gives me grace to have that faith, I will never have faith in him. The natural man does not understand spiritual things. The natural man hates God, does not look for God, does not want God, does not believe in God. Unless God, by his grace, gives you this faith, you will not have it.
Oh well, because we just jumped to another deal, because that's a very it's a unique interpretation of that scripture. And
we can pick another one. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. The word of God is where I'm going to get that faith from.
Well, but wouldn't that just be people, proselytizing and evangelizing to others?
Well, I mean, it could also just be reading the Bible, and of course, I'm going to go with all scripture being inspired by God. And so God. But
jumping to it comes from God, directly from God, that's
the primary means God uses to draw people to faith in himself is through gospel proclamation by prophets and preachers that he's put up. So yes, his word, if it is proclaimed faithfully by preachers, God uses that to save people.
Okay. All right, so I have to go on it. It's unique. You could definitely hold to it. There's no methodology by which I can say you're wrong. There's no methodology by which I can say you're right. So it's still the problem of it's still a hermeneutical problem on that. But when it comes down to when it comes to this, when you stated that all men hate God, they refuse God, they reject God. I was born a Christian. I was born into the faith. I was raised a confirmed Methodist. My mother is devout. I am not. And that was a long, long journey from recognizing that there was something wrong here to basically being to deconverting and being an atheist. Because it's weird, because when you state that all men hate it, all men reject it, no men don't want it, and all that, it sounds very much like for example, I can't find God. And I can't get access to God because down deep somewhere, I don't want access to it. When in actuality, by virtue of my epistemology, my philosophy of truth, coherence, correspondence, and pragmatism, and the fact that the existence of a God would provide more information and would allow me, more information is good, because more information allows us to make better and more informed decisions. That would be a good thing. If this was a true thing, it'd be a good thing to know. So I search for that and look for that. It's because I value true things over false things or over my feelings, because my feelings aren't necessarily true.
Sure.
I've had bad relationships where I could have sworn we were in love. We weren't. We so weren't.
Or maybe you felt in love for a time and then it wasn't working.
Right. So, and I was also, we were young. We were young and we were stupid. So, but when it comes down to it, searching for truth is what led me to this, because there are logical contradictions there. So I do want, if there is a thing that exists, yes, I would want to know that to be true. But all of the evidence indicates otherwise.
So according to the Bible, actually, you want a God that will serve your purposes and do what you want, but you do not want the God of the Bible. So this
but I can tell you that's not true. But I can tell you that's not true. I don't care what the God does. If the entity exists, the entity is okay. So let me put it in these terms. I live in a universe. In my worldview, we live in the universe. The universe is under no obligation to make sense to me. The universe does not care about me. As a matter of fact, if I step 1 foot off this planet, the odds are likely that I will die, because this universe is not fine-tuned for life. It's literally, we have a small cosmological window that we can survive on this planet.
Yep.
So the universe is indifferent.
Okay.
If a God existed, or even if it was like a super powerful alien entity, that like the God of Shakari that said, I am God. Okay. Even if it was that, I don't care what that thing wants, desires, or needs. That's not my concern. My only concern would be is wow, this thing is all powerful, and this thing appears to be all powerful, and it is making claims. Okay, great. Well, how do we determine those claims to be true? Is this God impervious to inquiry? What does God need with a starship? So if it is impervious to inquiry, and we can't break it down, we can't try to understand it, then what is the point of that? Because then it's just like this mysterious thing that's out there lording over us and giving us no justification to accept its existence or even its sovereignty.
That's actually one of the best, one of the coolest things about God is his security, where he does not feel the need to prove himself to people. In fact, there's actually no biblical argument for the existence of God. It is constantly assumed. It is assumed that there's this guy. And then when he gives people faith and grace, they understand him, they see him, they believe him, and they walk into a personal relationship with him. But there's a doctrine called the total depravity of man, or total inability of man. And that is the doctrine where I'm helping us pull out of that, where when I say natural man, I mean unconverted, non-born again, still in his unregenerate state. There has not been a spiritual thing of God worked on his heart yet. That person does not want the God of the Bible, does not serve the God of the Bible, is not looking for the God of the Bible, and is not interested at all in the God of the Bible.
Okay, there's a bunch of stuff in there. I mean, obviously, but going to total depravity, how could we possibly tell the difference between the observations that led to the existence of the total depravity doctrine, to like that kind of idea? And how do we tell the difference between that and people just not accepting what other people were saying? Because you could say, do you believe? I say, no, I don't. Well, and then you could say, well, why don't you believe? It's like, because there's no sufficient evidence to justify belief, to warrant belief. I can't believe in a God any more than I could believe that I could suddenly fly if I stepped off a building. It literally is a logical contradiction to me. I can't believe in square circles. Or a one-ended stick, or sorry, a one-ended stick. It can't be done. Like, my brain can't go there. So how can we demarcate? How can we tell the difference between people just simply not accepting because it's unwarranted, because there is no evidence to justify it? It's like, no, there's like the Parahe people in the Amazon. They had no word for God in their language. There is no word for God. There is no word for afterlife. These things are foreign to them. We meet them for the first time and we say, well, do you have a God? What is that? Well, it's this thing. It's like, do you have a God? We do have a God. It's like, well, can you show me your God? No, we can't show it to you. Then why would we believe in it? That's not total depravity. That's just common sense. If you make a claim and you can't demonstrate it, then there's no reason for me to believe it. So how can we say that it's total depravity how can we tell the difference between a total depravity and basic common sense?
Well, total depravity is also called total inability a lot of times by theologians, and you're kind of illustrating the point yourself. You are not able to believe in this God because your system of logic and what you understand to be true is not working with the God of the Bible. You cannot reconcile these two things. And I'm saying
contradictions, yeah, because logical contradictions can't exist.
And I'm saying the only way those things are ever going to get reconciled is if God shows you his unmerited, undeserved favor and gives you faith by his grace to help you understand that and see it in a different way.
So it's up to God.
Yes, all day. All day it's up to God.
So it's not up to me.
Not at all.
So okay, that's interesting. So then,
well, if God is God and he's sovereign and in charge, why would it be up to us? Obviously, it would have to be up to him.
Well, those are huge ifs, because then I would have to ask, well, then if I spend my life, if I die an atheist, and I spent my life having conversations, reading everything I could get my possible hands on, talking to whoever I could talk to, and I came to the logical, critical assessment that this thing does not exist. But throughout the course of my life, I lived a moral life. I lived as my empathy tells me to. I lived as my parents raised me to. And I tried to, I did my best to put more good into the world than do harm. I was a human being. But I died intellectually honest and critically sound. And then I die, and I'm standing before God. But I'm an atheist. Would I go to hell?
Unfortunately, all those things you've done, according to biblical Christianity, have just heaped up condemnation unto yourself, because your righteousness, as Isaiah would say, is as filthy rags to God. It means nothing to him outside of what happened in Christ. And God, it's very clear in Scripture that God has predestinated a chosen people for himself. And if you die and go an atheist, that is... Sure, you'll never choose God, right? And you'll go there and you'll be like, no, I never got there. But also that has a lot to do with because God didn't choose you to.
So you're a Calvinist.
Oh, that is a term for people that don't understand church history, but that would be a crass and vulgar way of explaining part of my systematic. Yes.
Well, I mean, you hold to predetermination.
Well, predestination is what Scripture teaches, so yeah.
Also, kind of, I mean, that's a specific interpretation. Okay, I agree that there's a difference between
the large bulk of theologians and great men in church history have all understand these things to be true. They've been defended since the very early church. Only in the last 500 years have people brought up free will and humanist ideologies and tried to merge them.
Well, yeah, because it's hard to juxtapose a God that says it loves its creation with the idea that if we don't have free will, if God is omniscient and knows all true propositions, and if I'm going to die an atheist and there is no opportunity for me to convert, so what is the point? That essentially we have no choice. We have no free will if God knows everything. Free will and omniscience, knowing all true propositions, can't exist.
They can't.
Everything is dictated.
Why the word free will is never found in your New Testament. I mean, anybody that makes that argument from a Christian standpoint just hasn't read their Bible yet. Free will can't exist with a sovereign God. When you back it all the way up, one thing's happening. Either God's in charge and man is responding, or man is in charge and God is responding. But only one of those two things is going to be true.
So how do you reconcile the obvious narcissism of this?
Well, that's the beauty of grace, because grace is the unmerited, undeserved favor of God. I don't deserve to be saved. I don't deserve for God to give me this grace. It's
Why?
not, huh?
Well, literally, I think we're getting to the kind of the core of it. Why would you think so little of yourself?
Because God has given me enough faith to see myself as I am. I mean, all throughout the Bible, humans are screwing everything up. We're very bad people. Our hearts are deceitful and wicked, and we do bad things, and we hurt people, and we lie, and we slander, and we disobey, and we are very, very sinful creatures. And apart from God giving me a new heart to desire good things, I won't. And even if I do desire things that we could say objectively good, I'm helping an old lady across the street. If I'm not doing that to glorify and give praise back to the creator of the universe, then I'm just heaping more condemnation on myself. It's not narcissistic, because the whole
not narcissism for you, narcissism of God.
But see, it's only narcissism so it's like if I burn your barn down, that's arson. I can't do that. If I burn my barn down, well, I've just dealt with my property. That's not my deal. The Bible presents God as a potter who's working with clay. He made man. He has the rights for man, and he can do with man as he pleases, is what the Bible says. So pride is when I put myself in God's place and try to take his credit. But technically, using that pride, he's that all the time, because
that doesn't fly. That doesn't fly when you're talking about a barn or an inanimate object. We are not clay. We are not a pot. We are not a barn. We are sentient. We are sentient, feeling, organisms capable of rational thought and observation. So yes, I created the Darth Dawkins Squeak toy.
Love it.
Okay, so I created the Darth Dawkins Squeak toy. I can do to the Squeak toy whatever I want. All right, but that's because it's just a Squeak toy. It's just a lump of plastic. It doesn't think. It doesn't feel. It is an inanimate object. We are not. Right. So we ourselves make rules. You just because a dog or just because an animal can't rationalize like a human being, or it doesn't seem to, or it doesn't like perceive the world as we do. It is a sentient organism. Mm-hmm. It is sentient in that it can interpret stimuli from the outside, and we make animal abuse laws, and we prosecute these individuals and stick them in jail for committing crimes against animals. Now, that we're holding by that standard, we hold ourselves to a higher standard than what God does, because God is ostensibly saying, because I made it, it doesn't matter what I made, I can do whatever I want with it. Mm-hmm. And that's just an angry child with toys that don't do what it wanted to do.
Well, not exactly. I mean, this is a God that is way bigger than us. We're talking about, we got the little Darth Squeaky, and that's one little thing. But on that same level, God created humans the same way you created that, only he did it even better, because it says he did it out of nothing. And so God created these things out of nothing. This is a being far greater than any of us. He has the right to do as he pleases. And whether you like that or hate that is determined by his grace and your faith.
Well, it's not a matter of me liking or hating it. What it's a matter of is that we have this entity that created thinking, feeling organisms, okay, that can rationalize, create. It gave him tools to understand reality, okay. It gives the ability to do this, but by your worldview, And so it's not a thing that I hold to, but in that respect, sure. By your worldview, you hold that God created human beings, he gave human beings all of these tools, but then the God then turns around and says, but you, like all the tools I gave you to determining what reality is, to do things like making predictions with orbital mechanics and getting off of the planet and visiting the moon and curing disease and all this stuff, all those methodologies that I gave you, the epistemology that I gave you that leads you to these great advancements to better survive your environment. You need to take all of those and throw them out the window and just faith in me, because I'm not going to give you anything else to work off of. No accessibility, no testability, no verifiability. All we have is hearsay, individual stories. So just like we wouldn't accept the individual stories that come from, like you wouldn't accept the individual stories that came out of some other religion, then this is all that God is giving us. No tools, with the full expectation of absolute faith in this thing and belief in this thing, with no justification. Why? This is where I get to with the narcissistic thing. Why the double standard? If this thing exists, why set everything in opposition? You have critical thinking, you have rationality, you have the ability to derive methodologies, you can make predictions with these things, you can understand reality, and these methodologies work for every truth claim in existence, except for the most important one: does this entity exist? That is a double standard.
Scripture teaches that all those faculties you're describing have been distorted and twisted by the fall. So if we want to look at free will in the Bible, it did exist for a short period of time with Adam and Eve in the garden. And very quickly, they chose to sin and rebel against God. And the Bible says that they represented the rest of the human race. So when they fell, they represent the rest of us. And we're all going down a track predetermined for destruction. All of us, off we go to hell. And we're now using these faculties and doing these things, but they're twisted, they're distorted. We don't see them rightly because of our sin nature that has caused a problem. And then God chooses to save people. And that's all by his grace. And because of that's because of who he is, not because of what he does. And yeah, this is the biblical God, and people are going to hate that all day unless God puts his grace on their heart and lives, gives them that faith to see him as a loving being that actually is doing something good and has a plan. It won't make sense, which is why I spend very little time trying to explain to people that are very happy with their worldview another way why they need to change. I'm happy to have a conversation, but they're not going to change unless God does something. I never would have changed unless God would have done something.
So how do you know that you're part of the elect?
I get a new heart. All of a sudden, I start hating sin. and I start loving God. And all of a sudden, these things in the Bible are screaming true at me, and it's making sense. And I have a personal relationship with Jesus, and he's communicating with me through the Holy Spirit and through his word. And so I mean, I can appeal to experiential evidence, which isn't going to hold up in a court of law. I get that. But all of a sudden, I have a whole different perspective shift. Things are different in my life now because this has happened. And you know that you have been saved because you know you have a relationship with a God that you didn't have contact with before. You couldn't find before.
Okay, but I can juxtapose that with my own life, is that my life got demonstrably better when I left the religion, when I left the faith, when I realized that these things are created by human beings, that they're ancient ideologies that have been passed down over time, and they have evolved and adapted and mutated over the years, over the centuries. But when I left, I fundamentally became a better person because I was intrinsically aware of both the responsibility I had for both my actions and my inactions. The idea of it's in God's hands or God has a plan don't exist anymore. Is that there is my actions and my inactions, and I'm responsible for both in the very short span of my life. I became a fundamentally better person. I became more involved because I recognized that this is all we have. This is it. You die and that's it. So by virtue of that, I understood, wow, I do need to make the most of this. I do need to be involved with the people that I care about. I do need to have these things because I need to reciprocate that and enjoy that and feel that and explore that and experience that to its fullest, because that's it. So it made me a more involved individual. It deepened my connection with other people and made me a better person in both my personal life and my society.
But that
was for me dropping the whole thing.
That's because you grew up with a religion that didn't have Christ. You grew up with the moral system, the codes, the do the blind belief thing. You didn't walk away from a relationship with someone who had saved your eternal soul and was now communicating with you. You didn't walk away from that. You walked away from a system. And so what I'm talking about is an experience of being born again, as the Bible describes it, or regeneration, when I get a new heart different than the one that I had before spiritually. And now I'm sealed by the Holy Spirit. People like that don't deconstruct. These people don't leave their faith. They don't go because there is something that has happened to them, and God is the one that holds them now. And so, yes, I would see that it would make you a better person the way you're seeing it, to walk away from what that was. But that was religion without Christ, which is incredibly dangerous and very bad. And that's the vast majority of what you see in a lot of places, is people using a religious system without the relationship of Christ in there.
Okay. So, but by virtue is a logical entailment. Of what you're proposing here is that there is an elect, there is like a chosen individual that will go, but you can change that if God chooses, but that can be changed.
Nope. Change is before the foundation of the world. God made these picks. This is going to happen no matter what.
So you were elect before
I was created. Yep.
But that means you were also elect before you made this change in your life.
Oh, I didn't make the change. He did. That's kind of the whole point.
Okay, so but before that, there was a point in time when you didn't believe the way you did. Now, you believe now.
There was a point where I experienced the change, but I was elected before that. Yes.
Okay, so you were elected before that.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't know it, but yeah.
Okay. So want to make sure that, because if you suddenly change and now all of a sudden you are elected and you weren't elect, so
no.
But that means that there are individuals out there that will never have this change, and they will go to heaven.
No.
And there are individuals they won't.
If you are elect, you will be regenerated. You will know you are elect before you die. That will happen. Maybe not use that terminology, but you will have a spiritually transformative experience on earth that will happen to you if you are elect.
Epistemologically, how could you know that?
What do you mean? How can you know that?
Epistemologically, what's your epistemology for that? Like, how do you know that to be the case?
Well,
that is a massive claim.
Well, the scripture teaches this is what happens. We become born again. It says we get a new heart, new desires, and our minds are now transformed by scripture. And you know it when that happens to you, because people move from your position to my position. And when that happens, they say, I was born again, or they say, I was saved. And if that doesn't happen for you and you never confess Jesus as Lord, scripture is clear, you're going to hell. The only reason you're going to confess Christ as Lord and have this experience and understand that you have a relationship with him, the only way any of that's going to happen is if God does a change in your heart.
Okay. So how do you reconcile the worthiness of this entity, given that it created everyone and then it created the circumstance of hell? Or whether you want to say that's like fire and brimstone or punishment or torment or just separation from God. Either way, however you want to define it, doesn't matter. But how do you reconcile that with like, I'm going to create everyone, and then everyone's going to have rational thinking and logic. You know, they're going to have all these tools that are going to be available to them, but only some of them are going to get to go. Mm-hmm. And the other ones, no matter what they do, they can literally live a pious life their entire lives, sitting in a monastery praying like this, and they're going to go to hell.
Yep.
Okay. How do you reconcile that? Is because that is not an entity worthy of worship.
I think that's
a rug pull. That's a rug pull. You see that, right?
I think that entity is far more in charge than people think of him. I think most people don't understand the God of the Bible. They do not understand the scale at which he is operating. They don't understand how he could be righteous. And so an illustration could go for it like this, because it's not about what we do. Okay, so let's say it's against the law for me to hit things, and I walk out in the woods and I hit a tree, and no one's there to see me. What's the consequence of that? I bruise my hand. Okay, great. I go down the sidewalk and I go in there and I hit a dude full on in the face. Consequence now, maybe assault and battery. I go to jail. Now I go to a cop and I walk up to him and I smack him upside the face. Now, well, I probably committed a felony or something. I don't know the law. But the problem is not what I did. The problem is who I did it against. And we don't understand who God is and how big he is and how good he is. And when I do any tiny little sin against God, I deserve eternal punishment for going against an eternal being. And he says in his word that through creation, he has left everyone without an excuse to understand that he's there. Now, he is going to do a work on the hearts of some people and draw them to himself as his chosen people. And that is 100% his prerogative. That's what makes it grace. It's not obligatory. I can't manipulate that. I can't cry for it. When God does it, it's because of who he is. But the reason we're damned to hell is because of who we've sinned against, not because of what we did.
So if we don't understand God, then how can we know that we're interpreting anything correctly if God is fundamentally not understandable by human beings?
Well, there's lots of parts of God he has revealed to us, and primarily he does that through his word. But there's a lot of God we can understand. We can know that he's omniscient. We can know that he's all-knowing. We can know that he sent his son to die for us. We can know a lot of these things because he's revealed them to us.
Okay. Well, these are because there are arguments. I still see that we're kind of mired. We're still kind of mired in interpretations of the text. And the idea is like what we're deriving from that, because there's no justification there's no concrete justification to make certain determinations or proclamations about gods. There's the individuals who I've always spoken with that hold absolutely to the idea that God is omniscient, God is omnipotent, God is omnipresent, and there are some that just say that they hold that he's not those things in those capacities, that he is merely maximally, and that his power only goes so far and his knowledge only goes so far, so and so forth. And some that even say that God is not capable of certain things, some things that God can't do, some things
absolutely.
that God...
I'm right.
Okay.
There.
So, and obviously I would agree with the idea that logical contradiction is not a thing that can exist. And if God is omnipotent, then it can do anything that is logically sound. It can't do logical contradictions. Like a God can't make a square circle or a one-ended stick or a married bachelor in that respect. So, but when we juxtapose these things against the what we know, the logical entailments indicate we run into logical contradictions. The idea but that's getting a bit deeper into science, more into science than I really wanted to go. It's odd going back to the faith thing.
Have I created a divide we can't bridge? No, I'm just kidding. It's
the idea. It's the idea that this is if you look at the idea of this God, ultimately, it's pointless. And the reason it's pointless because if that is the system that's been demarcated or been instantiated by this entity, then that system is in no way done for us. That system is done solely for itself, which is essentially the entity glorifying. But everything is done for itself. That is the narcissism. It's like that is the entity that everything that exists solely to glorify myself, to glorify itself.
Yes.
So that's narcissistic.
Okay.
That's definitionally narcissistic.
Yes.
That's bad.
And the way you're holding to that, yes. But this is
definitely that's what it is. It's like everything is a projection.
Is when someone attributes things to themselves that they're not worthy of. God never attributes things to himself that he is not worthy of. He is worthy of all these systems existing just for his glory.
No. Whoa. Everything is worthy of God, but God is the creator of all things. How does that work?
No. He's worthy of everything. We're not worthy of it. So,
but he's the only thing that ostensibly exists. Everything else exists by your worldview, by your lights. Everything that exists is merely a projection of itself, which means this narcissistic entity is the one that's establishing the parameters of what is worthy.
Okay, but it's not narcissism for you to set up your office the way you want to set it up. Although a plant in the corner might think you're narcissist. And I know we're dealing with sentient, non-sentient beings, but it's not.
No, it'd be narcissistic if every single picture in here was a picture of myself.
Okay, right.
And everything in here was meant to glorify me. And that your behavior, your dictated behavior, is meant to glorify me. And everybody in this live chat is meant. The purpose of this live chat is to glorify me and my channel and my endeavors, which it is not.
And I'm going to say that that's only narcissism because you're taking away something that only belongs to God. He is the only one that can sit in a room full of pictures of himself, and that makes sense, and that be worth something. Because
but that's not worthy of worship. That's not worthy of worship. I wouldn't worship anything. I don't care how powerful it is. If it simply said, "I put you here to glorify myself," then why did you give me why did you give me reason and rationality and critical thinking and logical expression? Why would you do these things? Why would you stack the deck against me and then arbitrarily say, no, don't worry. You weren't elect anyway. You're going to go to hell. So I literally created you to go to hell. No purpose whatsoever. And nobody's learning anything from this because ostensibly I'm the only thing that exists really, because everything, I could blink all this stuff out in a heartbeat and it's gone. And I could do it again if I want because it's omnipotent. So in that respect, this narcissistic entity that you're holding to, that is literally doing only everything for itself in service to itself, to its own ego, okay, for the glorification of its own own eternal existence, which is weird. If it exists eternally and will never not exist, then and it's all powerful, then why would it need to be glorified? Because it is the ultimate truth. It would be demonstrable as the ultimate truth. So why would it need to be glorified? There is no greater truth, so it definitionally doesn't need to be glorified. But it chooses that it wants to be.
Yes, exactly. You actually nailed it. You nailed it better than half the Christians I know. Yes.
Well, yeah, it still leads to a narcissistic conclusion that this thing is doing everything. It's literally masturbatory. That's all. I mean, for lack of a better term, it's just masturbatory on God's part. All of this is just for itself. Look at me. Look what I can do. And I'm going to end all this shit. And I'm going to start again and do with something else. That's not worthy of leadership or worthy of worship. That's not even worthy of being followed. Like, for example, this God revealed itself to me and said, "Hey, I'm God." And I was like, wow, the God exists. That does not automatically make me a Christian.
Okay.
It means I can't be an atheist anymore.
Okay.
You know, I would have to be able to demarcate. I'd have to be able to differentiate somehow between, is this God or is this some all-powerful or like really powerful entity claiming to be God? You know, how do I tell the difference between the two? But if a God suddenly showed up and said, "Hey, I exist," revealed itself to the whole planet, and it was like, "Oh wow, I do that. There it is. It exists." Would that make me a Christian? Absolutely not. Because that thing's got some questions it's got to answer first. I would hold everything to the same standard, the same epistemological standard across the board. So,
but in that system, you're God, and He has to prove Himself to you in your system. And
but the demand is to believe in it. So the onus of evidence to justify it is on it. It's not saying it's not like it created everything and then just hung back and did nothing.
Right.
Kicked the football on the universe and then pissed off, no evidence of its existence. It's not like that. I'm creating you, now believe in me with no evidence, with insufficient evidence to warrant such belief.
No, because He says He has provided the sufficient evidence that leaves Him just to condemn those to eternal punishment that don't believe. And so but those are the people who were never elected in the first place, right? Yes, in the scriptural teaching, what's going to happen is your critical thinking, your logic, the way you view the world, you have misused because you have not oriented it properly around God.
but I have to know it exists first in order to orientate. If I don't, if I assume that it exists and work from that, then how do I differentiate that from confirmation bias? If I interpret evidence through the lens of a prior held belief, that doesn't work. And we know why that doesn't work. Like, we can demonstrate why that's a bad system to work from, because then we get bad conclusions. All of the advancements we've made in medicine, agriculture, animal husbandry, all of the things that we have developed to help us survive on this planet, to virtually take control, ostensibly all the stuff that's going to eventually kill us as well. But when it comes down to it, all of the advancements we've made because we have strict methodologies that allow us to make these things. But then when we apply it to God, it fails. And then the expectations we are still supposed to believe. Well, if we believe it exists, or we hold that it exists before we interpret evidence, how is that any different from confirmation bias?
Well, if you see it that way, then I can see where your argument is that you're driving at to make that confirmation bias. But I'm saying the knowledge to know the creator of the universe that made the whole system is the only way we're actually going to even get close to understanding the system. And when we say that we understand a system that he says he made, and yet we exclude it from him, we've also created another kind of confirmation bias, because now we've said, well, okay, I believe all this stuff, but I'm not going to believe in that guy.
Well,
and I'm not going
because
to accept the evidence that he says he's given for himself.
We can't legitimately say that it said that it created everything. We know that it says that in a book.
Yeah,
but we
God
also
says
know
he wrote that book. He
okay,
says,
well, that also says it in the book, right? It's not like God said, I'm saying this and it's in the book. No, it says in the book that it came from God. It says in the book that God did this. But there are other holy texts out there where their gods do similar things.
So now you're getting into the question of how are we going to figure out which one of these religions is right?
Well, no, it's not that at all. I reject them all. It's not
okay,
that.
But we not only do we have the word of God printed in the Bible, but then we have the word of God that was made flesh in the person of Jesus Christ.
But how do we know? But how do we know it's the word of God printed in the Bible?
He fulfills all his prophecies. He comes down. He does exactly what he's been saying he's going to be doing for a long time. And Jesus comes down and he claims that I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I and the Father are one. And Jesus makes all these crazy claims and he does all these miracles. And we only have a few options when we're figuring out what happened with this guy. Maybe he was lying, maybe he was a lunatic, or maybe he was actually true. And he claims to be scripture incarnate. And so I believe those claims that he made were true.
Okay. And real quick, take it easy, Tina Jones. Thanks so much for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your night. Thanks so much for hanging out. Okay, but I mean, you believe them to be true.
Yes.
But do you have a justification for that other than the book says a thing?
Well, we have like Pliny the Younger wrote about Christ coming to earth and talked about the Christians that followed him.
No, we didn't. No, I recently did a video that broke down same claim that broke down why the claim is wrong. Pliny the Younger and his letters to Emperor Trajan and how to deal with early Christians and their
Flavius Josephus. Do you knock Flavius Josephus?
Flavius Josephus, but Flavius Josephus mentions Christ in two sections in the Flavius Testimonia and the second one where he mentions James, the brother of Christ. But in the first one, is not by even theological academia is not accepted because there's been way too much influence by external sources upon that. So it's not regarded as directly from Josephus, who himself is, which is weird because why would we appeal to a Jew? Because Josephus was a Jew who literally switched sides to the Romans, who fought against the Romans in Galilee, and then until he surrendered to Vespasian. And then,
that makes this testimony all the more believable because there's
But he didn't say it was true because he was writing down he was writing down the history of it. That's all he was doing. That doesn't dictate that Josephus believed it. That's just saying that he was writing down a history of the Jews for the Romans. That's all that was Josephus, because Josephus wrote two major texts, like the two major ones, and was the Antiquities of the Jews and the history. And essentially in Antiquities of the Jews, it was a breakdown of Jewish history for the Romans because Josephus, after 2 years of service to Vespasian, switched and became a Roman himself. And that's why he took the name Flavius, because Flavius was Vespasian's family name. That's why he became Flavius Josephus. So
do you knock out Tacitus too?
Tacitus. Tacitus. I mean, the video that I did the breakdown on had, I think it was like 10 individuals once, and it went everything. It was It was goodness, God, it was a minute ago, and it was so because it required it was so much research diving into that, but it was a really, really bad one.
So you don't think Pliny the Younger's, Tacitus, or Flavius Josephus' testimonies are reliable at all?
Well, no, because number one, none of them were present at any particular event. They were writing down what the individuals around them believed. Pliny's big issue was that as a provincial governor, because he was a provincial governor at the time in the freaking Roman names, Bithynia, and I can't remember the freaking name, but anyway, it was so he was a provincial governor, and there were Christian groups that were there. Now the Christians themselves were problematic in the sense that they were running around and they were refusing to respect or even acknowledge other people's cultures, other people's beliefs. In other words, Rome was a melting pot, and it was understood by the emperors that Rome was a melting pot. And because it was, in order to maintain the civility, or basically kind of maintain civility within the cities, within the province, we need to have a kind of we need to come to two terms like, you believe what you believe, we'll believe what we believe. That's pretty much it. Okay, so before Constantinople and all those events, when Christianity became the state religion. So at this time, Pliny was essentially entreating to Trajan, saying, hey, I've got these Christians running around and they're causing trouble. People are complaining. But I've done my own investigations and they're really not guilty of anything bad, but they got this real problem with, disrespecting other people's cultures and religions, being really aggressive with what they believe. And of course, they have this really disturbing willingness to die for that belief. And so all of these troubles that we have going on, all these troubles, like, how do I deal with that? And Trajan wrote back saying, look, we're getting reports of this from around the empire. Typically, we leave it to y'all to kind of deal with, like kind of handle that, kind of like deal with, choose how you want to do that. Because the first, persecution of Christians in Rome was at the hands of Nero after the Great Fire. That's when the first one, but persecution against Christianity was not a state thing. That was handled provincially and didn't come down from the imperial office. And so Pliny was trying to figure out how to deal with these people that keep these rabble rousers in his province, because if things fall to ruin, or if things get chaotic in the province, provincial governors were swift to lose their heads and be replaced with someone who can do the job. So Pliny was like, what do I do here? And so Trajan was like, deal with it how you best fit, how you think best. And so Pliny was very much like, okay, so it'll be, if you don't acquiesce, we'll give you 3 chances, 3 strikes and you're out. We'll give you 3 chances. And on the third one, if you still are going to then we're going to put you to death, because we can't have these individuals running out, because Pliny interpreted what was going on as the potential for sedition. And he was like, I can't have this in the empire. We can't have this because people are going to die unnecessarily. It's pointless.
Well, and many times those emperors saw themselves as a type of deity and required some level of worship to themselves, which was contradictory to the Christian beliefs too.
But we can't say that directly about Pliny the Younger.
Not directly.
Or about Pliny. We can't say, Pliny considered himself a god and he put himself. No, he was just a governor. As a matter of fact, he was not only a politician, but he was also very, very educated in many things. And also but you were looking at Pliny the Younger, looking at Tacitus, you're looking at Thales, you're looking at, but you also got to look at individuals like Lucian of Samosata and Celsus as well. And Celsus, who was so excellent in his anti-apologetics and breaking the stuff down and why it doesn't work, that Origen of Alexandria had to write a book titled Against Celsus. Okay, and Origen of Alexandria actually, is saying in his book, "Damn it, I hate him so much, but I gotta respect him because he's really, he's good. He's fucking good." So one of the ancient, back and forths was between Origen of Alexandria and Celsus himself, who hated Christianity because he saw it as divisive, he saw it as societally exclusionary. And he saw Christians as rabble rousers who were, and I think the best one is that he viewed Christians as too willing to embrace and convert the vulgar and the destitute and the desperate, while at the same time refusing to debate wise men. to like put your head, you know, like if you put your money with your mouth is and actually, you know, debate with someone who knows what they're talking about. This comes from Celsus, who had a profound understanding of both the, you know, Jewish history, Christian history, you know, apologetics, second century apologetics, excellent stuff. And so I recommend reading against Celsus, because that's where Celsus's works exist, was in the works of Origen of Alexandria. But it comes down to it, you know, these individuals, Tacitus, Thales, were writing down, even Lucius Samosata, who was a satirist, who completely thought religion was hilarious, was the highest form of comedy. These individuals were writing down stories that were around them. None of them were present for any of this. None of them were direct witnesses. What they were doing was writing comments like, oh, wow, okay, so the Christians are here. They follow this Christ figure. What is their story? We write down what they believe. But just because what they believe was written down doesn't mean that the writers believed it themselves.
Sure. Oh yeah. No, I would never argue that those guys believed any of it, or believed in Christianity at all. But there was no argument about the existence of Christ at that time.
Well, the person, but as far as like, it was written down that these Christians believed that he resurrected, but nobody held to that, because even Sextus Julius Africanus was kind of like, this is ridiculous. Like, first and foremost, Sextus Julius Africanus, when he read Tacitus's account, when he was found out about Tacitus's account of like, oh, there was like the crucifixion took place, and there was an earthquake, and there was a darkness everywhere, and Tacitus was like, oh wow, okay, well there was a darkness, and the sun that was likely an eclipse. But hang on a sec, and Sextus Julius Africanus goes to his literal, like, the calendar, and was like, no, it couldn't have been, because at the time of Passover, the moon was directly oppositional to the sun, so it couldn't have been an eclipse. So it wasn't possible at that time. Okay, so no, so that's why that's why the idea that like these things are apocryphal, these things are metaphorical. It wasn't like a darkness. It wasn't like an eclipse where everything was like dark and the sun was blotted out. It was a poetic darkness, in the sense that it was darkness because the Son of God is dead, and now we are descended into darkness because of that. So not that the sun was blocked out and a grand earthquake, neither of which are events that can be placed around the time supposedly that Christ was crucified. So the evidence is what goes around. Even in ancient Rome, they were kind of, there were individuals who heard these were like, what? Like, because they had never met the dude and only heard what people believed, and challenged them on their credulity, which is what Celsus did. Is like that he was like, how are the? Actually, it was Lucian of Samosata who said, well, I respect the Christians' morality, and this was in the Death of Peregrinus, and he's like, while I respect the Christians' morality, I abhor their credulity. It's like, how could they believe these things? Because they are so antithetical to reality. It's like, come on, guys. Not even the Greeks believe things to a certain extent. Like the idea of like cannibalism, of this is my body, this is my body, this is my blood, and like this. Like not even the Greeks would go that route, because cannibalism was taboo. Yeah. It's like nobody does that, but the Christians did, which was profoundly offensive to many people.
They weren't actually cannibals, though. We know that, right?
But it's proxy, though. It's proxy cannibalism.
Oh,
it's symbolic.
Okay, symbolic. Yeah, it's symbolic, but that's very different than whatever.
But still, whether you're doing it like literally or you're doing it symbolically, or like some Christians believe that taking the Eucharist, that it literally transfigures into,
that is lunacy. We can agree there.
Okay, so it's so odd, because there's some unique aspects that you hold to, and some mainstream aspects you hold to.
Well, I can't stay forever, and I would like to continue this, but let's handle a couple questions real fast.
Gotcha.
I got to roll. Is that okay?
Yeah, not a problem at all.
On the conversation, I would, but my clock's running out.
No, not a problem at all. Not a problem. We've gone almost 2 hours. Let's take a look at this. We did have a few super chats come in. Let's go ahead and take care of those real quick. Atheist Allosaurus for $1.99. Thank you so much. It's Yo Bridge, you rock, man. Thank you so much, Allosaurus. Do appreciate that. Allosaurus, my wife's second favorite dinosaur, by the way, behind Pachycephalosaurus, because Pachy's are her favorites. She loves Pachy's. So thank you, Atheist Allosaurus. Turing Test 2 says, critical question of the night. Do either of you get the urge to plait your beards?
Bro. I ride Harley, so I braid mine up anytime I got to go on a ride. Else, this happens real fast.
I have considered possibly I've considered Gaelic beads as a possibility.
Dude, they're awesome. Use them.
Yeah.
I've
So,
done a
but
couple
I don't think I'm long enough.
They weight it down. They're super. My wife hates them, but I think they're amazing.
Well, it's because they smack her in the face.
You can get like a pack of thanks. You can get like a pack of them for $9 on Amazon. There's no reason you haven't done that yet.
I just was that it may not be long enough for him. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to check him out. Thank you, Turing Test 2. Appreciate that £5 super chat. It's a heavy super chat. David of Oakland for 10 freedom dollars says, Bridge, if you were brought before Joe's God, what will you say to it? If I am brought before Joe's God and I have to say anything to it, then obviously that God is not omniscient, and we're going to have a real problem. Because if the God is omniscient, there'd be no reason for it to bring me before it other than to gloat in me going to hell. I would just literally just go to hell. There's no reason for me to answer a question. Like the idea of like you're before St. Peter, you're going to ask these questions, or you're standing before God to justify. It was like, why? God already knows. If God exists and God is omniscient, then God already knows what I'm going to say. And God already knows my reasoning. Why do I need to just like, what am I going to justify it? It's like, oh, no. Oh, well, this is the argument that I had. It already knows it fails. There's no point. That would just be completely narcissistic to do. It'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm bringing you in front of me just so I can see the look on your face when I cast you into the pit. It's like, what's the point? It's like, if God's going to be that way, I'm going to take the Marcus Aurelius route. It doesn't deserve worship anyway. So. But thank you so much, David of Oakland. Appreciate that super chat. And Ida Pimputo says, Scripture has been changed through the centuries to control the people. Unless you have the original Scripture, you're not following the true word of God. That's Ida Pimputo for $4.99. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, anybody that holds to the inerrancy and infallibility of Scripture is going to use a key phrase in its original form, in the original manuscripts. And when we talked about me changing translations regularly, translation technology gets better and better, and they've discovered more text. And it depends on which text family you want to go from. But you want to get as close to the original as you can, and then you want to put that into modern English to get as close as you can. But honestly, if you're going to understand Scripture in its original form, you'd have to like speak and know and be very scholarly on these original languages. So,
okay. So Colin Definitely Not Cromwell for 5 Americans says, tonight was great. Thank you, Joe, for coming onto this channel. JL is okay. Thank you, Colin. I do appreciate it.
Like, I haven't been reading all the comments on this, but the amount of hate I received from Godless Engineers crowd was overwhelmingly and profound. I mean, like, I got ridden hard for having a beard, for having 2 eyes and a mouth. Like, it was nonstop. Your crowd is way more respectful. So, like, thank you. This has been a much more pleasant experience.
Awesome. Hence the idea, but the bridge the divide is essentially what I do. The activism that I work with is about the idea that people can believe what they want to believe. They are allowed to believe what they want to believe. But it does not give them the right to dictate, just because they believe it, to dictate how other people live their lives. But so we need to find a common ground where we can come to this agreement, where we can say, you can believe in your God, and I don't need to believe in your God. I have no justification to do it, and that should be okay. There should be no need to pass legislation to try and force me to believe in your God. Or to live by your standards.
Totally on the same page there, which works out well.
Cool. Logan Sandman says, this crowd gets a lot of beard envy. Half the people that are subscribed to my channel subscribe for the beard alone. So, I think it's the beard. This is a beard-friendly zone. Is
Good.
Up and Out says, cast me into an eternal mosh pit. Bucket, eh? If we are going, at least that's where the good music will be.
Okay.
So we'll say that. Let me see here. I think that was all we had. I didn't see any other questions. Let me give just a couple more minutes. If you have a question, really quick, tag me really fast, and we'll give you a question for Joe or a question for myself. Just do it real quick. Just we'll say 2 minutes. You got 120 seconds. Throw it down a question real quick, and I will pop it up, and we will see if Joe wants to answer it, or if I have to answer it. But looking through here, yeah, it was really good live chat tonight. And because, the antagonism is not necessary. I understand that some people like T-jump, or not to disparage them, but they have a particular approach that's a little bit more trollish than I think is warranted, And I think that we could do more work coming to common ground.
You seem to be going against the cancel culture current, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely, because we can't dictate what people believe. I can't dictate. I can't say, like, you can't believe this. No. And I can't say you didn't have an experience. That would be intellectually dishonest of me to say you didn't experience a thing. It's like when somebody says, I do ghost debunking. And so, like, ghost debunking, supernatural debunking, and explain, because I work in the film industry as well. I'm a screenwriter and an actor and a director. And so knowing special effects and how things work and knowing, the optics and things of that nature, I can break these down and explain why they're fake, why they're hoaxes, or why they're just misidentification. So, but an individual says, I saw a ghost. I have no doubt you encountered something or you experienced something. Okay. The question is, what did you experience? And how are we going to get to a conclusion? That's always the important thing. Nice. Mr. E-Man says, why doesn't Bridge the Divide? Why doesn't all-powerful God create that which is not good enough for its own standards?
Well, according to Romans 9, God says that he fitted vessels for wrath and destruction to display his power and glory. So God will either be glorified in your salvation and redemption, or he'll be glorified in your destruction. Either way, he is glorified in obliterating the creatures that have rebelled against him, or saving those that he has chosen to save. You don't. I know you won't like that answer, but that's what I'm gonna say.
If that's the case, then I would just go ahead and just annihilate. I'll just go for annihilation. Just annihilate it. Just like that's it. That's as glorification as possible. There's no need for it.
It would be.
It'd just be like, just blink it. Is because what does the torture do? I mean, or torture inevitably, it's when you torture someone is either to get information or to teach them a lesson. What lesson can be taught if the torture is eternal?
Yeah.
And never ends.
Yeah.
What is the lesson there? There's no need for it. It's literally contradictory to the idea of the punishment itself and why the punishment exists. Unless, of course, it's to serve the narcissistic ego. You will burn for eternity because that is what I want. Wow. So it's not to teach me something.
Well,
it's not
I don't think it is to teach you something. I'm not going to call it narcissistic, but I would actually agree with your second statement. I would say that's why it's there.
Wild. PhD Tony is in the house. Good to see you, PhD Tony. The glacial isostatic adjuster. Good to see you, bud. And $5 Australian is, why does God allow people to lie and commit evil on his behalf? Can he not tell them not to do that?
Well, he kind of did tell everybody not to do that in his book, and he said you shouldn't be doing all that stuff, and they keep doing it anyway. But then Romans 8:28 says he can work all those things out together for good for the purposes of those that he saved, and so God can use those things to create something better out of them. But he's actually been very clear: you shouldn't be doing that. That is not what I've asked you to do. 10 Commandments, not lie, right?
And let me see here. And we got Frayed Edges. Good to see you, Frayed Edges. Says, Bridge the Divide. So if the Bible is so good, then how come so many native people and traditional people got destroyed and killed in order for it to spread, and have none of them gone to heaven?
Oh, people have done nasty things in the name of their religion. All kinds of nasty, terrible things in the name of religion. That doesn't mean that that's a objectively good thing. And I don't think, like, especially if we're like going to bark down the Crusades path, they weren't there to spread the Bible. They weren't there to tell people about Jesus. They were there to grab more people to subjugate, to build bigger, fancier churches, to consolidate more power to the Catholic Church. So I don't think their objective there was to go help people.
So, and as David of Oakland brings up, what about the slaughter of the Amalekites?
Well, that's the same as the slaughter of anybody else that's gone against God. The Amalekites were not serving God, so he's just in destroying them.
And utilizing the Israelites to do that.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And so,
okay.
Yeah.
Which is odd because historically speaking, I mean, the same thing was said of the Hittites as well. But when Hattusa, the ruins of Hattusa were uncovered, and we began to discover more about their society and their government, we realized that the biblical interpretation of the Hittites were not like the Hittites that existed, that the Hittites weren't even really aware that the Israelites existed. They shared a border because the Hittites were north of them. And so they shared a border area, and there were border skirmishes, but the Hittites, Hattusa, like the king, I can't remember, but he was the second. It was like, it starts with that, but anyway, that king didn't really concern himself with the Israelites. They were individuals that they border skirmished with over like grazing land, but they weren't really concerned with them. They didn't care about their God. They had their own Indo-European God. I think it was like this entity with a stag head or something like that. So But the Jew said, oh, these are the enemies of God. When the Hittites were kind of like, we're just kind of like doing our own thing. And like none of that is reflected. Like they weren't in their culture, they weren't like death to Yahweh, death to the Israelite God. They were just like an alternate, they were just another civilization.
Yep.
So that had better resource access than the Israelites. And I think that there's an argument that it was border skirmishes because the Israelites wanted better access to more resources. And so they were pushing against the Hattusan border, and the Hittites were kind of like defending their land. It's like, what are you doing? So I think there's an argument there. It's what the evidence points to. So, all right. So I think that was the last question that came in. This was really, really good. So thank you so much, Joe. Any closing thing to leave with?
Hey, well, like the whole reason I do this, and like I said, I know I'm not going to change your mind unless God decides to do something. And I know that my beliefs probably aren't very popular on this channel, but the whole point, the reason that I do this is to tell people the good news that Christ died for sinners. And if you don't repent from your sin and turn to his way, then you will suffer eternal destruction. And if God uses that to draw someone to himself, then I'm really happy about that. And I've served my purpose. I'm not out here to go kill and go nuts on all the atheists. I'm here to actually try to help people. And I'm trying to be consistent with my worldview. So my worldview says this about when I see scripture, it says this about these kinds of people. And it says that if they are going to get saved, it's because people are going to go tell them the gospel. So that's what I'm trying to do. So hopefully people understand that I'm not like bigoted, mad, and angry at all the atheists. And actually like, hey, you're going to believe what you're going to believe. That's your business. But if you're interested in believing something else and the Bible says that there's consequences for your current beliefs, I would like to tell you about that.
Okay. And real quick, PhD Tony for 5 Australian says, so the Crusaders were wrong for the Crusades, but the Israelites were right to kill and enslave the Amalekites.
So if God tells you to do something, you're supposed to go do that thing. And that's called obedience to God. And if I go kill someone without God telling me I'm supposed to do it, now, then we get into a whole rabbit hole of people that claim God told them to do stuff. And did God tell them to do it or not? Whole different conversation we'd need another hour for there. But yeah, Crusaders were wrong because God didn't tell them to do the Crusades. The Israelites were told by God to go do what they did. So there's a difference there. But I realize that's a whole conversation to have.
Just yes or no, is there a way to differentiate between a command from God and a command that one believes is from a God?
Yes. But like I said, that's like
interesting. Okay. Interesting. Maybe you should do a video on that. That was like demarcating what is what you think and what actually is. That would be an interesting video. If you could explain the methodology behind that.
That would be decent.
All right. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate the time. This was a blast. I know you got to bounce, so I appreciate you coming out, man. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'll see you around.
Anytime, boss. You have a great one.
You too. Bye.
All right. That was Joe Ensley. And really, really good. I think productive conversation. PhD Tony, I said $5 super chat. Apologies. How does your guest know God didn't tell the Crusaders to do that? That's ostensibly what I was kind of kicking to. It was like, how do you tell the difference between that? He says that there is a way to do that, but maybe that will be future content that he's going to make, and he'll be able to explain that methodology as to by what methodology can we determine the difference between something that we believe comes from God and something that actually comes from God. So that'll be really, really interesting. Oh, wow. Mink says, my son-in-law recently. Oh, that's awful. That's terrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope he's okay. I hope your son-in-law is all right. Mental illness. That's tough. Colin definitely not Cromwell says, I want to hear that conversation. Yes. Yes, that would be a very good conversation. That would be very good. Getting into the methodology, how we can determine these things. I had kind of a list of stuff that I wanted to go down, that I wanted to go through. We got through most of it, got through a bunch of it. Some of it was kind of like eliminated because, he holds to predetermination. He holds to the concept of the elect. These are concepts of Calvinism, even though he himself doesn't consider, I don't think he considers himself a Calvinist, but he holds to tenets of Calvinism. So Mr. E-Man says, thank you for all your input. I have enjoyed the chat. Thank you, Mr. E-Man, for 5 Australian. Appreciate that, bud. Really, really do. And thank you for all the gifted memberships as well. I appreciate that. Let's see. Clive Will says, I just ignore the voices in my head and keep killing anyway. My Atkinson says, still more enjoyable than any Flurford debate. Absolutely. It's just absolutely insane. And that David of Oakland, I'm not sure. We didn't really get a chance to get into that, why he was offended by the Calvinist label. I don't know, because You know, the labels are there to demarcate specific ideologies, specific faith ideologies, or tenets of a particular belief. And so I don't know, you know. Elizabeth Sylvester, thanks, JL. My pleasure, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for hanging out. Appreciate that. Guitar Dog says, so this God gave the permission to murder babies? The answer is yes, apparently. So obviously not a lot of Christians hold to Joe's version of God, that they themselves would utilize his same argumentation to justify their interpretation. It falls down into is like, how can we demarcate the or how could we possibly determine what is the appropriate interpretation of the Bible and which Bible, you know? And it's the same problem that all religions have that have denominations within them. So, but yeah, I think the not a lot of Christians hold to his particular God, because his particular God by definition is narcissistic, and it's not done for us, and that we don't really play a major role in this, that it's all by its own design for itself. You know, it's all FUBU for God. You know, it's FG, you know, it's FGBG. And there's no point. It ultimately makes it all pointless, which kind of like reduces everything, because there is no meaning other than that which serves God. Everything, all other meaning is completely arbitrary, and it's just not true. It's not false. It's just false. If I derive a meaning from my life, that doesn't matter. It's false, because the meaning is supposed to be for God. And, you know, that's a pretty hardcore. That's a hardcore God, and you know, not a popular one. We'll say that. So, yes, Joshua Lee says, good conversation. Glad it didn't turn into a yelling match. Agreed. I also agree. I'm glad it didn't turn into a yelling match. So often these things do. And I'm glad we got to get into like phallus and Tacitus and all that stuff, because I recently did a video on that. So really good stuff. FGBG, for God, by God. Fred says, so much more chill than the atheist hotline. Well done, JL. Thank you so much, Fred. I appreciate that. Thank you. Mink says, a great conversation. Yeah, it was. I think it was productive. I really, really do. I think it was productive. And thank you so much. So that went about 2 hours, about 2:09. Yeah, looking good. Let me see here. Let me tell you what. Let's do this. I need to run to the restroom real quick, and I need to let the dogs in. So give me 1 second, because there's something I want to look at that we are going to. I was thinking about doing a created video on it, but I don't know if I want to. I think I'd rather just check out this video with y'all, because this is interesting. So, but we'll get there. Give me just 1 second. I will be right back. Let me do this. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to hit the little atheist room, and then let the dogs in, and I will be right back. All right, I'm back. Who is it here? We say Logan Sandman, good to see you. It says, let the dogs in. So the answer to that question is yes, I did let the dogs out. Then I had to let the dogs back in. So Clive Wells, I love it. Let me see here. JL's just offered a little prayer. He'll be back soon. Hardly. Oh, I just got a message via Discord. What is this? Someone's commenting on a syllogism. Humans write books. The Bible is a collection of books. The Bible is written by humans. That is a valid syllogism. It's also a sound syllogism. So, because we know the authors of because we could identify the authors of the books. Give me a break, love. That's just the messages I get on occasion be like, you were wrong about a thing. It's like, yeah, this is not so. All right, so Jay Verse, good to see you. Says this stream began when I started my run. Awesome, fantastic. Okay, had to go shake hands with the devil. Yeah, that's what my wife calls it. Logan Sandman says, once you pass 40, we all pray when we pee. Awesome. Josh Lee says, I have to know what is this intro break music and where can I get it? Epidemic Sound. Epidemic Sound is where I pull all of the music that I utilize. They have an excellent selection, so I strongly recommend it. And I basically composed that with the background video and the music, and I did all that in Premiere. But all of the music comes from Epidemic Sound. Let me see here. All right, so the one thing I want to look at, HSP says, if I were in a bad mood, I totally forgot about it. Excellent stream, beautiful chat. Thank you so much, HSP. So I wanted to look at a video, and I know y'all are probably going to hate this because it's Matt Powell. I have a Matt Powell video that I was thinking about doing a created content on, but then I was like, I'd rather talk about this via live stream. I really, really would. And it's his most recent one. So
Colin.
All right. So let me remove that. All right. So, no, it's not Matt Powell. No, I'm sorry. Oh, wait. No, not Matt Powell. No, my apologies. Not Matt Powell. He reminds me of Matt Powell. Okay. So, but I got it wrong. This is from a much bigger channel. I believe called Fighting for Truth or Fight for Truth or something like that. And this guy's got like 160,000 subscribers and he does like this stuff. So, okay. So, I think I had a super chat come in. Mr. E-Man says, 2 Australian for the entertainment value. Thank you so much, Mr. E-Man. I appreciate that. Thank you for that. All the super chats and all the gifted memberships and all that all go to really support this channel. So I do appreciate it. Thank you also very, very much for all that support. Make sure I didn't miss any. Ravens Eden, new member of the Godless Army. Thank you so much, Ravens Eden. I totally missed that, but I go back and I wanted to check. So thank you so much, Ravens Eden. Enjoy the emojis. If you have all you members want to show the emojis that you have access to, and of course the channel badge as well. Thank you so much for the support. All right, so this one is from a guy named Colin. Okay, and he did this video regarding Mr. Beast and his friend Chris, who's recently came out as trans. And I've noticed something. I've noticed that a large amount, because of what this event that's taking place, where Mr. Beast's friend has come out as trans. He was married. He has a child. She was married. She has a child, and a lot of Christian channels have utilized this opportunity, I think, to clout chase. That they are seeing, it's like, oh, wow, we can go after a big name. We can go after Mr. Beast. And all I see is like, because they weren't doing it about anybody else. They'll say that they'll be transphobic and they'll do like bigoted stuff here and there. But a lot of them are jumping on it because it's Mr. Beast. Anything with Mr. Beast's name attached to it is going to get more views. So I think this is just clout chasing. And it's just it's cloud chasing justified by their bigotry and the transphobia. So I wanted to look at this one because this dude put let me go ahead and just pull it up real quick, and I'm gonna make myself small right here. Actually, no, let's do this. No, I'm not gonna do that one. Let's do that one. There we go. So this guy kind of puts himself like this guy Colin is who this dude is. Kind of presents himself as like this kind of like all-American kind of kid, clean shaven, true Christian, yada yada yada. But I wanted to kind of like this because this is the kind of subversive hatred that is going on. That despite this clean-cut image of what this person is putting forward, this is the face of the shit that both Joe and I kind of agree on, of that subversive movement to try and slide our country further closer towards theocracy. And we'll see it here in a second. Let me go ahead and fire this up. Yes, Colin, you are the better looking Colin. You are. Not to mention, you were also a Cromwell.
Colin here, and welcome back to Fight for Truth.
Fight for Truth. That's it. He's got, as of right now, he's got like 160,000 subscribers, something like that.
The channel where we bring you Christian commentary about the things that matter.
Okay.
In today's video, we're going to be talking about Mr. Beast.
Okay. Already, I think this is cloud chasing because they're going after the biggest YouTuber out there. So that's the only reason. They are transphobic. They do bigoted stuff. They attack the transgenderism and the trans movement. But I think that because everyone is targeting this, I'm pretty sure it's cloud chasing. Fangirl98 says, good night, guys. Sorry, it's 2:30. It's 3:20 a.m. Can't stay awake. Thank you so much, Fangirl. I appreciate that. Thanks for hanging out. And we'll see you on the next one. Tsunami says, I'm suddenly as dry as the Sahara. as dry as a cat box. All right. Fight for Truth equals fake Colin. Thank you, Clive Wells. No true Colin fallacy. Logan Salmon says, that is a bottom lip envied by Mr. DeCastro, in my opinion. All right.
Now, Mr. Beast, also known as Jimmy Donaldson, is the world's biggest YouTuber with 147 million subscribers at
technically 148 because that's what it says on your screen. But yeah, correct. He's the biggest, which is why I think this is getting so much attention. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me when I say that this is just a way to clout chase while being transphobic and trying to basically project their own hatred and their own personal problems and scapegoating their God with it. So they get to project their own bullshit. They get to scapegoat that bullshit with God. They get to scapegoat God for that bullshit, and then they get to clout chase at the same time. It's perfect storm. Perfect storm.
At the time of recording. Naturally, this constitutes one of the most significant influences on any audience anywhere in the entire world. This is not an exaggeration, and it seems.
Well, I mean, you look at his content. He does like silly content. He gives it a bunch of money, but I think he overestimates. I personally think he overestimates Mr. Beast's like influence. It's not like we have like the Mr. Beast effect. We have like a John Oliver effect. Like, John Oliver's like his investigative journalism has led to actual changes in policy and actual actual improvements in society. I don't know if there's a Mr. Beast effect, other than people going out and doing stupid shit. So
that Mr. Beast at one point wanted to use his massive reach for the good of Christian values. He once commented the following message, quote, "Thank you for watching me, and I will always show my faith somehow on this channel," end quote. At one point,
technically, it wasn't the end of the quote. He said, I'm glad people will like it. Sure. And yeah, Up and Out says, I've never seen a single Mr. Beast video. I think I've seen 2. I don't follow him. It's just not the kind of content that I'm interested in. Sure, he's running around handing out tens of thousands of dollars for doing like challenges and doing whatever and doing these entertaining little videos. I don't care. It's literally a rich person. It's literally one guy who is throwing out other people's money. That's not his money. He doesn't walk around with like all that cash on him at all times. That's all set up. There's all production that goes into that. That money is secured. That's not technically his money. He makes up money in the ad revenue that he gets from all of his videos, but he's not walking around with his own cash. He's got bills to pay. He's got mortgage. He's got cars. He's got family. He's got everything that he's handling. So yeah, that's like people putting money in there, and he's using their money, sponsorship money and stuff, to give to them.
Point early in his channel's history, Mr. Beast had various channel banners with a cross and a Bible verse.
Yeah, he was a believer. He was either a believer or he was just kowtow, or he was just like using it as the image. He was using it either way. The Mr. Beast would have to comment on that if that was legitimately him. Like the vast majority of people are Christian, so I'm going to throw this up there to attract that attention, or it was just a ruse, or he legitimately was. PhD Tony says Mr. Beast doesn't do enough ghost content to appeal to JL. This is true. Thank you, PhD Tony, for the 5 Australian. He doesn't do enough ghost content. Otherwise, I'd debunk his ass too.
But it seems that he has now completely and totally abandoned the faith that he.
which is also, if he came to a party, I mean, we wouldn't say that that's like bad and stuff. We would say like, well, why? Why would he do that? Why would he leave the faith? What is his justification for leaving the faith? Because atheists can be atheists for bad reasons. Some people are atheists just because literally they're angry about events in their lives. There are bad reasons to be an atheist, just there are bad reasons to be a Christian. So depending, what is his logic? Like, what is his justification? Are we going to go in that direction? Fuck no, we're not.
He once professed. Here's a clip of him on Logan Paul's podcast explaining that he is now an agnostic who does not believe in Jesus.
I'm not a Logan Paul fan, by the way.
Watch this.
Not religious.
At all?
No, I'm not.
What about that Jesus?
No.
You say no.
Yeah, like,
Are you atheist?
You just asked the same question different ways. The answer's the same.
Atheist or agnostic?
Yes, Jay versus. Didn't you say atheism is a conclusion? Atheism is a conclusion that you can come to after what I've said. It atheism is a conclusion. Is the conclusion you come to after a critical examination of the evidence. That is the most intellectually honest position to hold. Now, if you don't do that, you could still be an atheist for bad reasons. Like you can conclude that God doesn't exist or God is whatever. You're going to be an atheist, not believe in it, because for like bad reasons. Because a good God doesn't exist, so therefore no God exists. You know, you have to look at each one of the individual claims. Like for example, assuming automatically that there is only one possible God, and then not like if there's a God, there's only one possible one, and I'm not going to believe in that one because of this emotional reason. That's a bad reason, you know, because just because you feel it's not true doesn't make it not true. So you need the same epistemological standard across the board. So you need to be able to eliminate that God as a possibility. It's like, it's not even possible that this thing exists. That's why I'm an atheist. It's because God has been eliminated as a possibility. So. Oh, okay. So Javer says, I was just teasing. I was implying as a conclusion, everyone eventually human beings will be done with this religious nonsense. We will be done with it. We don't need these antiquated tribalistic endeavors. And we sure as hell don't need a proxy cannibalistic, corpse worshiping, blood magic ritual death cult telling us what to do.
Agnostic. Like, I mean, the universe is complex, and like it's hard to believe someone didn't do it,
But there is more.
Agnosticism. I get that. Like he doesn't know. There's the possibility, but he doesn't have enough information. That's an intellectually honest position to take. I agree with you.
More than just this happening in the Mr. Beast YouTube crew. Recently, his castmate named Chris Tyson came out as transgender. For reference, here's a picture before he was trans.
Okay. So before, like you just heard him do it, yes. This guy, Colin, is going to repeatedly misgender Chris. I don't know what Chris is, if Chris has chosen a new name. I don't know if she has chosen a new name. Women can go by Chris. So I don't know if Chris has chosen a new name, but this guy, Colin, repeatedly misgenders Chris throughout the video. So I apologize for that. Just I want to make people aware of that is something that's going to happen. So just to be aware of that. And thank you so much, Pinworm, for $2 freedom dollars. Says, just got here. Sorry, gonna rewind. Please enjoy the conversation I had with Joe Ensley. It was a really, really good conversation. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for the support.
And here's a picture afterwards. And Mr. Beast has responded to all of this saying the following, quote, "Yeah, this is getting absurd. Chris isn't my nightmare. He's my bleeping friend. All this
This dude can't even say the F word. He can't even say fuck. Mr. Beast said he's my fucking friend. He did. So it's just like, come on, dude. Don't blur it. Just go with it. Just say it. You can get away with one. PG-13, man. PG-13, you can get away with one F word. I say it all the time. I'm salty as fuck.
Transphobia is starting to piss me off," end quote. There are a few initial observations to be made here. First, I just want to recognize that Chris Tyson does not seem happy at all. After all, how could
I have no idea how he is able to make that determination from this picture. I have seen many pictures of Chris. Since this came out, I've seen many pictures of Chris. And as a matter of fact, from what I've seen of the pictures I've seen of Chris, from what I've seen, Chris looks happier. Because in none of his pre-transition photos does he have the smile that he had. I would say I interpret it as, I mean, I couldn't honestly say, I mean, still, it would go, but from what I gather, it looks legit, like he looks legitimately happy, like authentically happy. And none of his prior transition videos or prior transitions videos like that does he ever really smile. It's all his smile always came off as half-hearted or maybe like forced. But now you see him or see her in her interactions with people. You see her in her interactions with people, and she looks demonstrably, like just obviously much happier, more authentically happier, being her authentic self. So I don't know. This, I think, is I think, unfortunately, was an unflattering picture. I think this was an unflattering picture of Chris. And I think that's why Colin is using it, because it's not the best picture. The angle is bad. The lighting is bad. And Chris appears to be in mid-statement, like mid-word right here. So this was also at an early point in Chris's transition. So pointing at this and saying Chris looks unhappy and unhealthy, this is just insane. I don't think there's no way to conclude that from this image.
Could you be happy when your life is structured in this way? In fact,
because it's your authentic, because it's your true self. It's your authentic self. If you can be yourself, you will be happier. If you have to hide who you are, then you will not be happy. I became exponentially happier when I was able to accept who I was, despite the fear of my father, because my father was extremely anti-LGBTQ. If my father had known that I was bi before he died, I don't know what would have happened. My mother knew, but my mother's like, we can't let your dad know about this, because my dad would have fucking flipped. But yeah, when you don't have to hide anymore, you can be happier. Clive Wells, I've done research. Okay, I've done research. But I'm not even subscribed to his channel.
In fact, every photo I see of him as a so-called trans woman is one in which
the fucking quotes.
he looks unhealthy, both physically and emotionally. This is what the trans ideology ultimately does to people.
That's just flatly wrong. That's a flat-out lie. That is a bullshit lie.
See, this man went from being a seemingly happy and healthy gentleman to looking like a bizarre caricature of a depressed man-woman.
I told you it's gross. I told you that it's foul. From what I saw, the pictures that I pulled up, and you can Google these images of Chris, before and after. If the vast majority of Chris's pictures, like his pictures, look like that. Okay, just kind of like there. Like the vast, or maybe like a half-hearted smile. Even I could say that he was really happy with the pictures when he had when she had her son. When she had her son, those pictures, those pre-transition pictures, she looked very, very, very happy because they did that wide smile. She's a parent, okay. But all of the kind of hanging around with Mr. Beast pictures, she doesn't look that happy. Just kind of just there. All the post-transition, when Chris is acknowledged and is able to be her true self. All of those pictures, extremely happy. You can't deny that smile. As a matter of fact, I want to... It's you can't deny... Can't deny. I'm sorry. I didn't expect to grab one of these, but I'm going to. That is not an unhappy individual, and that's a very healthy looking individual. So just because just pulling and this the worst picture. Like a very unflattering picture than judging an individual like that. We wouldn't do that. It's demonstrably, it's gross, is what it is.
Also recently tweeted out that he's been on hormone replacement therapy for months now. And frankly, I cannot think of a better advertisement for traditional gender roles than a single picture of this man pretending to be a woman. It's
God, this guy's disgusting.
Genuinely sad. Truly,
I don't even know what the arrows are pointing at. I guess trying to point at her shoulders, or Then I'm not sure. Neck, shoulders, arm, I have no idea. Like what, like just that one specific area, it's fucking weird.
Can't imagine a more depressing state of affairs.
Well, just that's incredulity. You can't imagine it because you're not Chris. Chris is living her authentic life. Chris is now able to accept who she is. That doesn't entail that what you say is right. Just because you can't imagine it, that's just an argument from incredulity. You can't imagine someone could be happy. Well, guess what? It's not you, dude.
And I hope he finds Christ, because that's clearly what he needs.
Join our cult. Join our cult. It's what you need. Oh, it has electrolytes.
But before you feel only sympathy for Chris Tyson, please recognize that his actions are not just hurting himself. Indeed, the biggest victims in this whole situation are his poor wife and young child.
So that's a picture of Chris pre-transition, with her child and her what I think is now soon to be ex-wife. No, they are not victims in this. An individual who is happier, who is making strides to be happier, to be their authentic self, to acknowledge who they are and not be afraid to be who they are. An individual is everyone around them and themselves, everything will be improved. Because when people are happy and can be themselves, their outlook on lives improve, they become more productive, more engaged members of society, and everyone can be happier. Yes, sometimes transitioning can lead to difficulties because you are changing the paradigm, and changing the paradigm of, say, a marriage or parental relationships. These can be hard, but these things happen all the time. Divorces happen all the time, and sometimes divorces need to happen because the couple is not happy together. Staying together for the kids is a bad thing because all it does is psychologically harm the child. So in that, because that animosity between the couple will translate to their parenting. When they are separated, then they can make better choices because they are not saddled with their unhappiness. So, oh, what is this? Why is being trying to be freaking relevant? Get that search bar off my screen.
As you can see in this tweet, Chris has chosen to abandon his marriage in...
He didn't. He did not abandon... Oh, sorry. She didn't. God damn. She didn't abandon the marriage. Chris and her ex have been speaking over quite some time. And yes, they are not wearing their wedding rings anymore because obviously his ex feels she can't be married to a woman. That's fine. That's her prerogative. Okay? If they can't stay together, that's healthy to make that split. It's not an abandoning, it's someone recognizing this is who I am. And the prior paradigm does not fit anymore. So it would be bad if Chris transitioned and then she would turn around and demand that her wife stay married to her. That's weird. So allowing for a divorce is for the wife's benefit, is for the ex's benefit, and for the child's benefit. So there isn't that animosity and that hate between them. So a completely, totally back-assward way of looking at these things, completely ignorant and a bigoted way of looking at it, just completely blind to the reality and the evidence.
Pursuit of transgenderism, or at least that's certainly how things appear. His wife is now without a proper husband, and his child is...
What is a proper husband? What exactly is a proper husband? Like he never defines, like this little douchebag never defines it. He never defines, like, I'm assuming what he thinks is a biblical one, like where the wife is subservient to the man. It's like, sorry, excuse me. I'm assuming that's what he thinks is a proper husband, but fuck that. We know that LGBTQ couples can be just as, if not more so successful in raising well-adjusted individuals, well-adjusted children than cis couples can. And so, not to mention that children raised by LGBTQ couples typically are not as bigoted and are more inclusive and accepting of other individuals, of other minorities, because they've been raised that way, because they are a child of minorities.
Now without a proper father. And while it does seem to be the case that Chris will still be taking part in the raising of his child,
co-parenting,
one can only imagine the emotional toll that dysfunction like this can have on a young boy.
It's not dysfunction. It isn't. things change. This kind of asshole is the dude who would disavow his child if his child was gay, if he had a gay child. This is the kind of asshole who would literally cut them off and just disavow and just like, no, we're cutting you out of the family. This is the kind of asshole. This is the kind of thinking that leads to that.
The fact is, we are now looking at the ultimate outcome of transgenderism. Ask yourself, is this what you want the future of our world and our country to look like?
Yes, I want people to be happy. I want people to be their authentic selves, and I don't want people to be afraid to be who they are. Okay? If who you are does not cause harm, if who you are does not run around destabilizing shit, if who you are makes you happy, be that person. But be that person in respect that it doesn't harm other individuals. If there is demonstrable harm, you can't do that. We declare that as a society. But be your authentic self. Be who you are. Okay? And we will make allowances for individuals for the small percentages that may be like obviously individual schizophrenia going and so on and so forth. But as far as living your true self, being who you are, your identity, acknowledging it, not being afraid of it, yes, I want that, because people who are not afraid are more productive, they're more involved, they are more engaged, they are more aware, they can live their lives happily, and they can focus on their goals, and they can accomplish them without constantly worrying that someone's going to find them out and call them out expose them when they're not ready or out them. So happier people, that's what we want. Happier people.
Trans worldview will ultimately lead to broken marriages, broken children, and broken people.
No, it will lead to some divorces. Yes, there will be some divorces. There are also some some couples where one came out as trans and they stayed together because it wasn't about gender that defined the marriage. It was about the partnership. And there's some people who, when they realize, I can look past this, that this is not a defining quality of the marriage. It's the partnership between the two. And some have no problem with that. Some simply can't. Some simply can't look past it. That's fine. That's them. So yes, ultimately there may be some divorces, but that means those individuals they can move on to find people that make them happy, to be happier people. Mr. Andret says, "My divorce saved my life." There you go. Or you can just acknowledge that everybody is fucking bi to a degree. Because if my wife came out as trans, I still, it's all good because I love her, him, and like that with she right now. I wouldn't give a shit because gender is not it's like the ultimate defining quality of a human being for me. Neither is biological sex for all that for the matter. It's the character of the person, the character. That's what's important. So don't mean to grift off MLK.
Look at this photo. It's a seemingly normal, healthy nuclear family.
Seemingly, that's the point. Seemingly. I've seen pictures of Chester Bennington days before, he made his tragic choice. Days before, and he looked happy as a clam. Just because someone looks happy doesn't mean they are.
Do you want America to look like that or like this?
I want America to look the way I want America to look like a country that allows people to be who they are. That's what I want, because that is a happier America.
Just think about that for a while. And by the way, remember that the biblical worldview, by contrast, calls husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church.
So we're juxtaposing everything against his book, because a book said a thing.
Ephesians 5:25. But of course, you don't have to be a Christian to know that this is wrong. Romans 2:15 says that the law of God is written on the heart of even the unbeliever.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's cult speak is what it is. It's like, they believe, but, they're just denying in their unrighteousness. Yeah, he can fuck up.
And in virtually any other society in the history of the world, at least any functional one, this behavior would have been seen as unacceptable.
No, not true. Absolutely not true. The Native Americans actually had a term for it, and it was called twin spirits, like a twin spirit individuals. Even transgenderism has existed throughout humanity. And all of those societies, Indigenous American Society, Native American Society, Grecian, Rome, everywhere. And there were names for it because they weren't judged like that. So,
you see, abandoning your marriage and effectively abandoning your fatherly role over your child should be seen in any moral civilization for what it is.
Who determines what? Give me a fucking break.
Pure selfishness in its most raw and bizarre form.
So to be happy so that you can be a better person and ostensibly be better for not only yourself, but for other people as well. Because when you're happy, you're a better influence and you're a better presence around other individuals. Happy people tend to make other people happy, or at least alleviate their pain. And so that's selfish to try and improve. Fucked up.
But what has our culture done? What has the trans ideology done by contrast? Well,
Allowed people to be happier.
they have completely flipped all of this on its head. This is what the enemy loves to do. Instead of
There's that dog whistle term. You see this, referring to them as the enemy and utilizing the Bible to back that up. That's that dog whistle shit, that these are the enemy. They must be targeted lest they defeat us. This is the Christian drawing the battle lines.
rebuking this man for his immoral actions and calling him to be a real husband and a real father.
It's not for you to dictate. It's not for anybody to dictate. And you need to demonstrate your God exists, or God could come down and do it itself, but apparently doesn't want to. So
many people are praising Chris Tyson for being a so-called brave and beautiful.
That is a happy person. Okay? That I think someone who is versed in FACS and microexpressions would say that individual is a happy person.
Beautiful trans woman. In fact, when anyone with a shred of common sense calls this out for what it is, they are immediately rebuked by the woke mob.
Okay, so it's our failing. It's our lack of common sense. So it's a failing. Is why we can't see this. So automatically, he's got to cast aspersions upon the justification for these things. So because we have no common sense.
They pretend to have the moral high ground.
We do have the moral high ground. Happier people make for better societies. Unhappy people are individuals who have to hide themselves and deny who they are in public, and that can often cause irreparable harm and psychological damage. And psychologically damaged people don't make for good societies. So we want happy, healthy, well-adjusted individuals, because happy, healthy, well-adjusted people tend to promote the well-being of others.
This perfectly fulfills the words of Isaiah 5:20, which says this, quote, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil."
Yes, but just because a book said a thing and you are dictating that a thing is evil when you have no methodology to declare why is it evil? Oh, because a book said it? Bullshit. Bring your God down, and your God can speak for itself. Otherwise, you're just quoting out of the book, and that's all your justification that you have.
Who put darkness for light and light for darkness.
And there's nothing in the Bible that dictates that even speaks about transgenderism, and the idea of that is that literally says nothing about it doesn't address it. So, and to think that there weren't transgender individuals in Iron Age Palestine or even before that is just ignorance.
We have clearly exchanged the truth for a lie, and that is becoming more and more evident in the trans movement especially.
No, it's not. Obviously, I don't need to repeat myself over and over again. But I will say I do have kind of an issue with the kind of the militant ideology, militant trans, because when ideas go militant, then that creates problems. That doesn't create middle ground. That creates problems. And so ideologies should not become militarized, but they do need to be fought for, but not to the extent where we need to start cutting the other person. When ideologies become militarized and we start engaging in the same behavior as our opponents, nothing is going to get anywhere. No work or no progress can be made when we're both, just actively trying to cut each other's legs out from underneath us. We can't do that. So the militarization of the ideology, that's societally problematic. So
here are just a few examples. One person said on Twitter with regards to this situation, quote, "There goes a father figure that the kid won't ever be able to look up to."
Why? That makes no sense. Of course, it's standing for yourself and being your authentic self. I can look up to an individual. I can look up to that individual. Be your authentic self. It took me a long time to be my authentic self. That's a reason to look up to somebody, because they have the bravery to do that. Because they are no longer afraid, because we have created a society where we don't where we don't as a whole villainize these individuals or vilify these individuals.
And tragically, many Christians would consider a tweet like this to be overly harsh and not Christ-like enough.
Well, it's not. It's not accepted. It's not acceptance at all. So I would say, from a perspective of Christianity, I would say it's not, because it's meant to attack.
To these Christians, I would simply say, read your Bible and ask yourself, what would the Apostle Paul have said about this in the first century? I'm
Probably something super fucking ignorant.
sure it would be a lot more harsh than most modern Christians could possibly stomach.
Either that, or we don't know that. We can't say that. There's no way. Paul's not here to speak for himself, and you're just making an assumption about that. There's no justification to say, oh, well, Paul would definitely think this. How the fuck do you know that? This is a smug little shit.
But this hesitation is not helpful. Chris needs to be told that he is dishonoring his family and being a terrible excuse for a father.
Chris is not. She is not. She's absolutely not. These archaic biblical institution, it has no merit whatsoever.
Saying that is actually being loving towards him and towards his wife and child, who are the real victims here. When did we all decide to stop standing up for what is good and right and true? When did we all give up?
We haven't. We've changed, because societies change as we understand things better. That's all it is. So just because you don't like the change doesn't make it wrong, doesn't make it evil. You just happen to don't like it because that's your own personal fucking proclivities. But, bigots can be bigots.
It is written in Proverbs 27:6, quote, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend, profuse are the kisses of an enemy." The whole trans movement
It's fucking irrelevant.
is the kisses of an enemy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so another dog whistle.
And the encouragement of someone who clearly does not have your best interest at heart. And
Really? I don't know why trans is about the individual, not other people. It's about them being able to be their true selves. It's not, it's not like, it's like, oh, the world wants me to be trans. No, there's no push.
Christians should not be yielding 1 inch to this evil madness.
See, there's another one, another dog whistle. Literally drawing battle lines, yielding an inch. These are war terms. These are battle terms. Okay? This is the fucking underhanded shit I'm talking about.
We need to stand up and tell the truth. But instead, many Christians are afraid to tell one of the most basic truths in the world.
Is it like who determined that? That gender was an absolute. Sex isn't even an absolute. Give me a break.
That a man cannot be a woman. Look at what the woke world has done to us. It has made us utterly afraid.
And well, we don't, and they don't say that. They can present as a woman, secondary and tertiary sex characteristics. No trans person that I've ever met claims that they are biologically changing. That's an impossibility. They're not biologically changing. They're simply they're changing the exterior, the secondary characteristics, to match their internal experience. Just like people dye their hair, or people get laser eye surgery, or people get breast reduction because their breasts are too heavy and they're causing problems on their spine. Okay? It's elective, yes, but people get elective surgery for a number of reasons. To be happier, to be their more authentic self. This is merely an extension of that. That's all it is.
Afraid to state a basic biological fact out of fear of being called.
It's not a biological fact, because they don't claim otherwise. The trans community does not claim we're changing a biological sex, changing their gender identity. Gender identity is not biological, so he's obviously making the false equivalence.
Transphobic, which frankly is a silly made-up term in the first place that we shouldn't care about at all.
So they don't care about words. They don't care about words. They don't care that it's going to be their definition or the highway. I got it. Does not. So possesses no understanding of what transphobia is and what it entails.
Stop yielding to this nonsense.
Yeah, frayed edges, these fucking air quotes. You notice Matt Powell does it a lot too. Yeah.
But moving along, here was the response of Chris Tyson to that previous tweet. Quote, "This is just more dog whistling that somehow trans and gender non-conforming folks aren't safe to be around kids."
It is. It is more dog whistling.
Tucker, his son, begs for me to come back when I leave for like 2 days to film. He is so loved and happy. Kids aren't born with hate. It's taught to them by people like you.
Yeah. Hate is taught. Hate is taught.
and my child will only know love.
Boom. Well stated, Chris.
End quote. And of course, this all sounds very nice and sweet and flowery, but unfortunately, words actually need to have definitions, and they need to actually make sense.
Words are also polysemous, so deal with it.
Again, this just demonstrates how backwards our culture is. First,
No, it doesn't.
let's just cover something right at the outset. It is perfectly reasonable, perfectly just, to suggest that a person mentally unstable enough to think that they are a different gender.
And now it's the false equivalence that transgender individuals are mentally ill. So yeah, okay, so this is the kind of shit. This is so fucking egregious. I would, to the moon.
Is also someone who is less safe to bring around your kids than the average person. After all, if you can't tell the difference between categories as simple as man and woman, who's
We can. We have definitions. There's man and woman, which is the gender identity of the individual, man, woman. Then there's male and female, which are the biological sex determinations. Okay, that's it. So, because you take this to its extreme. Like, then what defines a woman? The ability to have a child? Many women can't have children. Many women are born without the ability to have children. Okay, what about intersex individuals? Man or woman? It comes down to what they feel. Because there are intersex individuals that feel that that feel male, okay, and ones that feel female. So they present the way they feel. So these are individuals who are presenting the way they feel. That's it. He's making this argument about trans individuals while completely ignoring that it also applies to intersex individuals who will feel either male or female, and they will present that way.
to say that you can tell the difference between something like, oh, I don't know, good and evil? I wouldn't let...
Well, that's also arbitrarily, like what is good and what is evil is also arbitrarily assigned, so...
let a paranoid schizophrenic influence my kids, and by the same standard,
A paranoid schizophrenic. Fuck this asshole, because I had an aunt who was a paranoid schizophrenic, and my wife's half-brother is a paranoid schizophrenic. Dylan Mulvaney, Chris Taylor, these individuals are not paranoid schizophrenics at all. Fuck this asshole.
I wouldn't let a trans person influence them either. It's called having common sense and actually caring about your child.
No, it's being a bigoted asshole and being unable to recognize the difference between someone who is legitimately mentally ill because neurotransmitter malfunction in their brain and an individual who is gender non-conforming or identifies as another gender because that's the way they feel that they are. Just like an intersex person will present as one of the sexes, whichever one they feel more of. So...
And in the tweet, Chris says that he must be a good dad because, of course, his son misses him when he leaves the house.
Yeah. If you're a shitty father, your children will not miss you. Or maybe they were. Maybe they will. Maybe they will miss you because you're their dad. But shitty dads, I can tell you, my dad did the best he could with the tools he had available to him, which weren't many. And my dad was pretty heavy-handed with me. It would have been worse if he'd known who I was, known that I was bi. It would have been worse. And my younger brother got a demonstrably different upbringing than I did. But yeah, I would miss my dad if he was gone for long amounts of time, even though he and I had a very acrimonious relationship. There were good moments. There were excellent times, good memories, a lot of bad ones too.
Let me respond to that claim directly. Obviously, just because your son misses you doesn't mean that you're a good father.
Also true. I just pointed that out. Yeah.
And chances are, given the fact that he has divorced the child's mother, Chris's son is going to be missing him a lot more. But
not necessarily. If you remember, if his schedule has him out filming, then he can be back and they can share custody. Ostensibly, it could wind up that he has the kid that his son. I forgot his child's name. Why do I want to say Thatcher? No, but his child's name, that his son's name, that his son will be able to hang out with her more. Especially if Chris pulls back from doing filming and moves in another direction career-wise. Who knows? We don't know. Those things have not been determined yet. So he's making assessments about the future that he's completely unjustified in making.
But you know what he's going to miss more than anything as he grows up? He's
Being taught how to hate people. That's what he's gonna miss out on that. He's gonna be taught to be accepting of other people.
going to miss having a father who actually cared enough about him to put his own bizarre personal sexual confusion aside for
it's fucking gross.
for the sake of his son. He's going to miss having a father that he can actually have respect for. According to the words of Jesus himself in Matthew 19, a man leaves his father and his mother and holds fast to his wife. This, of course, means that he does not...
Oh, he didn't finish that quote. So, and that's not even the appropriate context. That's not even what Christ was talking about. That doesn't even apply to this. Cherry picking motherfucker, Texas sharpshooter. Taking one bit of information, assuming that is what it means while ignoring all the other context of it. You have cherry picked your shit. Fuck you.
not abandon his wife and his child to become a woman, contrary to every fact of reality.
If he abandoned, or if she abandoned them, if Chris abandoned them, then Chris would be gone. No contact. That's abandonment. No contact. Left. She left. Chris has not left. Chris is still in the child's life. Chris is still there raising the child. Chris is it has accepted her responsibility and is raising that child with her ex. Okay? That's it. That's Chris. That's what Chris is doing. Chris is being a responsible parent. Divorced couples do it all the time. Joint custody.
That has ever existed. But then, of course...
Was it Tucker? Tucker.
Chris suggests that the people critiquing him are full of hate. They're bigots.
They are. They are.
No, lovingly trying to call someone out of their evil and selfish lifestyle for the sake of an innocent woman and child is not hateful.
Wow, just making just huge claims there that he can't back up. This.
You know what is hateful? Abandoning one's proper role as a husband and father to become a pseudo-woman.
Oh, wow. The balls on this motherfucker. Or lack thereof. Because, running his mouth on the fucking internet. So, yeah, none of this is true. Chris has not abandoned her family. Chris has not abandoned anybody. Chris has not vanished. Okay? The question is, how many people will abandon Chris because Chris is being her authentic self? That's the real question. And guess what? Chris's ex hasn't abandoned her either. Okay? They're just not staying married. If this was legitimately his point, then he would be doing a video calling out divorce itself. But this asshole Colin doesn't do that. It's not like he has a number of videos where he attacks divorce as divorce itself, because Colin knows that divorce is sometimes the best option to make sure that people can stay happy and keep and maintain a positive environment for the child to grow up in. So I went through Chris's channel. This dickhead doesn't have. I think he's got like 50 more videos than I do, and he said nothing about like coming down on divorce like this. Like only like they have failed as parents and failed as fathers and mothers, and they are doing no, because he knows that's not the case. Oh, but because Chris was trans, forget all the other reasons why people can get divorced, like irreconcilable differences. They just can't get along. Oh, but it's a failure because Chris happens to be trans. Fuck this asshole and his hypocrisy.
That is hating your family. Proverbs 19:18 says, quote, "Discipline your son, for in that there is hope. Do not be party to his death."
That is completely irrelevant.
And it is also said in Scripture that neglecting to discipline your child properly is effectively hating them.
Which is fucking cult indoctrination, because the evidence shows that beating your child is not a good thing.
Here's the principle. Training your son in real ethical values. This is what true love looks like.
Well, an ethical value would be to accept people as they are and not demand that they change and then make their lives worse by judging them for it and judging them harshly for it. So being more accepting would be the more ethical action. To be accepting and be loving and be coexisting with these individuals. So that would be the more ethical route. Calling them out, hating them, pointing at them, calling them mentally ill, creating societal divide, that is not the ethical action. He's a fucking hypocrite. Ain't no, yes, Mr. Andrat. No hate like Christian love.
On the other hand, giving him a terrible example and then praising yourself for being a brave and beautiful trans woman, that's
Oh God.
what true hate looks like.
No, it's not. This is the horror of indoctrination. This is how deep the shit goes. This fucking cult bullshit goes.
Parenting is not just your personal opinion. There are actual standards given to us for this by God. We need to stop this ridiculous
Your God doesn't exist, so it doesn't fucking matter.
game where we pretend that everyone's opinion is valid.
Oh, really? Where we pretend that everyone's opinion is valid. Your opinion is that your God fucking exists, and you want everyone to believe that. The fucking hypocrisy on this asshole.
Obviously, that's not the case. You don't get to treat your son and your wife this way and then say that you're loving. And
If she is being her true authentic self, and his son Tucker feels loved and feels supported and is taught to be accepting of others, that is a wonderful relationship.
And you certainly don't get to say that everyone else is being hateful when they disagree. And by the way, I want to show you something else as we move forward, something really curious. Ironically,
Well, I mean, they can disagree with it, but if they openly attack it, then that is being hateful.
Tyson once publicly made a mockery of the trans movement. Here's a clip. Watch this.
Bro, what are you doing?
Bro? Did you just assume my gender?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to misgender you.
You're such a heliphobe. Get out!
I sexually identify as an attack helicopter.
This was the tongue-in-cheek. Red's rhetoric ran off of this. I identify as an attack helicopter. The heliphobe, because he's a helicopter. And yes, I get the joke. Okay, we can be satirical, even about the things that make us uncomfortable about ourselves. Sometimes being satirical is how we deal with these things. It wouldn't surprise me if that sketch wasn't Chris's idea. Or if it was Chris's idea, it wouldn't surprise me if it was Chris's idea. It really wouldn't. So that's sometimes the way we deal with shit. It's how we internalize it.
Now, in the rest of the video, which you should be seeing on your screen now, Chris Tyson jokingly says that he identifies as an attack helicopter.
And from my take on this is that this was a satirization of it, of the extreme nature, because the trans movement was becoming more militarized, was becoming more militant. And the extreme nature, the extreme arguments of that, people were becoming kind of like, self-parodies. And so this is them commenting on the parodization of the trans movement, where it is becoming as aggressive and cringy as the individuals who speak against it. And this was them kind of like, look, this is ridiculous. You don't need to go to these extreme lengths and be screaming in people's faces about this stuff. So I got what they were trying to say here in this satire. I got it. And actually, it was funny with him spinning around with cardboard on his arms. That was actually pretty funny.
And anyone who disagrees with him is a helophobic bigot. It's an ironic way to demonstrate how foolish and absurd
This person, this asshole Colin doesn't understand the difference between satire and irony.
The trans worldview is. This video was eventually taken down and apologized for, but it still demonstrates something. Namely, it
satire. It's satirical.
Demonstrates that Mr. Beast and Chris Tyson, on some level at some point, actually knew the truth about
likely
this. They know that the trans movement is blatantly denying...
No. They knew that Chris was likely trans, and that Chris had probably confided in her friends that Chris was trans, and Mr. Beast was supportive of that. And so, quite possibly, that's why this is how can you kind of deal with stuff, Plus, the act of satirizing a negative aspect of thing does not say that the thing itself, it does not have merit. So there are negative aspects to the trans movement, the militarization of that ideology. That's a negative aspect. Because when ideologies become militant, that's a bad thing. No progress can be made. If you want to satirize that, that's cool. Yes, definitely you can satirize that, absolutely. So that's not disrespectful. That's pointing out that this is ridiculous.
Reality. A man cannot be a woman any more than a man can be an attack helicopter.
One's an organic, or one's an organism, one is an inanimate object, or one is an inanimate construct. But Biologically, he's correct. Gender-wise, he's incorrect. He's flatly incorrect.
And they know this. So what changed? What happened that would make Chris Tyson decide that a man actually could be a woman?
Words are polysemous. Words are polysemous because man and woman does not dictate male and female. These are two separate things. We may have equated them before in the past, but we recognize that we don't have to do that. And to do that is not accurate, is not entirely accurate. We're not taking something away. We're adding something to. We are further defining a thing because words are polysemous. We can do this. Words have multiple definitions.
The answer is that he was susceptible to the woke worldview.
People don't become trans because of the woke worldview. I've been called woke and I am not trans. Okay? But I am LGBT. But I was... Before this whole woke thing came up, I've been bi since I've known I was bi since I was like 15. I accepted myself and came out as bi when I was in my 20s. When I was like 24. So
take this as a lesson, folks. You cannot be morally neutral. You will serve a God, and you will have religious values that are fundamental to
evidence for that claim.
Your worldview. It will either be the true God or it will be a false God.
No, evidence for the claim. God doesn't exist anyway. So we can throw this out the window because God doesn't actually exist. So.
And Chris Tyson has chosen the latter. And this is the fundamental problem. We live in a world
God?
where people get to create their own definitions of love and hate.
No, they adhere to those definitions. They absolutely do. But how we apply it, contextually speaking, is completely arbitrary. You know? Like there ain't no hate like Christian love.
Define their own reality. Define their own ethics. And then we want...
Yes, because these things are fucking arbitrary. These things are fucking subjective.
Wonder why things are getting so messed up in this country. It's simple. The trans worldview says to serve yourself in a lie, and the biblical worldview says to serve God in truth.
No, that's not what the trans world... There's no trans worldview. There's just transgenderism exists. So therefore it should be a part of the worldview because it's a thing that exists. That is an orientation. That is literally who these people are. So by saying that it's something that can be like basically saying that trans people don't exist, that they just don't exist. You know? So it's a mischaracterization of mental illness, stuff like this. This is this bullshit fucking logic this asshole is fucking working with.
John 4:24. And it's time for Christians to stand up and recognize that. The trans worldview is destroying lives and families. If you truly...
It's not. There's no evidence to support that. The CDC hasn't brought out anything. There isn't. So...
care for people like Chris, and frankly, if you truly care for his wife and child who are being so obviously mistreated, then you will...
they're not. They're quite wealthy. They're very well off, and now Chris gets to be a better parent to her son. They may not be able to. They may not be together. They may divorce, which I don't think has been confirmed yet. They may divorce, which is entirely their prerogative. Just means the situations could be better for the kid because both parents will be happier.
Stand up to the woke mob. We must not back.
The woke mob.
Back down an inch from this. We need to stop giving up ground.
Battle terminology, war terminology. That's what it is. A call to arms.
We must not be cowards in the face of the spirit of the age. And men, stand by your wives and your children. Do not bow to the weird gender-bending worldview of our time. This will strengthen our churches and our society.
Nah, they're going downhill too, dude. Attendance is at an all-time low, and people are leaving the faith in droves because your faith breeds death. Your faith breeds death. Your faith breeds division. And we are freaking tired of it.
And it will provide a bulwark against the LGBT agenda.
A bulwark. Fuck, this battle terminology.
If you don't want the world to look more and more like this, then do something about it.
I want people to be happy. And if that is what a happier world looks like, let's do it.
And finally, I just want to put out a reminder that there is hope in the gospel.
No, there isn't. There is no hope in the gospel. And I think this video is almost over. Yeah, this video is pretty much done. So he just goes on to preach at this point. So fuck this asshole. He's ignorant. He's a bigot. And for him, pushing this idea that that it is a war is dog whistling. That's all it is. It's just dog whistling to conservative Christians. That's all it is. So, an absolute coward, and a hypocrite. So fuck that asshole. Bam! That video goes in the goddamn recycle bin. Emptied. I was thinking about doing like an actual created content on that one, but then I was like, no, I want to talk live about that one because I want individuals to be able to respond to this and get people's immediate responses to that video. So, a world with red arrows. Division and hate speech. It absolutely is, Frayed Edge. Absolutely. All right. Did I see something? Did I miss something? Oh, that was Pinworm Super Chat. Okay, just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Let me make sure I didn't miss any. No, that was PhD Tony. That was Pinworm. Okay, I want to make sure that I didn't miss any like milestone chats or anything like that. All right. So yeah, I wanted to kind of look through that one. I really did. My pleasure, Makes. I really did. I wanted to, so the reason I want to look at that particular one, because that is an example of what is going on. That is an example of the kind of hate ideology and the individuals like this equating this thing to a war. Because when they set terms like that, that goes to show the lengths that they will go to. For them, it is a war. And because of that, I think is the reason why the trans movement has become more militant over time. It has become more extreme. Extremism never works. It never does. Extremism is self-defeating. But because they view it as like this attack on everything, they attack. Because they view it as that, the Christian Christian right will attack trans people. The trans people will attack back. So I don't know. Ostensibly, I would think that the Christians fired the first shot, but this whole like militant shit has got to go out the fucking window. The militarization of this, being antagonistic, even though you have the high ground, does not entail that you should be or that antagonism is justified. So, but that's just, as I said, it's just my arbitrary, it's just my subjective opinion. So, Don Giovanni says they're trying to declare a struggle against the other. Agreed, they are. They absolutely are. And I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't support it. When you draw lines in the sand, nothing's going to come from that but bloodshed. And we don't need it. We don't need it. We need more bridging the divide. Oh, the hatred's got to go. You're right, Mr. Andrew. The hatred has got to go. Oh, let me see here. Joshua Lee gifted 5 Bridge the Divide memberships. Thank you so much, Joshua Lee. I do appreciate that. Welcome to the Godless Army. Darren Delaney, Angel, Zachariah Hooper, Gosh of Heckfire, and Kova42. Thank you so very, very much. As a matter of fact, let me check something real quick because we got a bunch of gifted memberships. I want to check and see if it's about that time. Let me go to the studio. And yes, I know I use Dark Theme. I will set that up later. We'll close that and let's look at, I want to see. Why do they always change shit up? This is a pain. Wait, hang on a sec. I am a member of the... Hang on a second. What the heck is going on here? Well, that's weird. Let me see here real quick. Okay, let me see here. Let me see. If I go to my studio. And we look at this. Here we go. Memberships and emojis. I want to see if the next emoji's been unlocked. Sorry about that. Membership levels. Emojis. How far are we? Do we have another emoji? Not yet. Okay. So just so it says 7 more. 7 more emojis. Okay, gotcha. So if we get 7 more, I can unlock the next emoji. I have the next emoji already set up. Sorry about that. I was just checking to see how many memberships are left. Let me see here. Missed the gift before Joshua Lee. There were 10 more. Elizabeth Sylvester gifted memberships. Thank you so much, Elizabeth Sylvester. Appreciate that. Thank you, Ugly German Truths. Appreciate that. Let me see here. Yeah, it looks like 7. It looks like 7. Well, that was odd. Anyway. Okay, cool. All right. So, whoa. Hey, Frayed Edge has been a member for 8 months. Thank you so much, Frayed Edges, for the milestone. And oh wow. Elizabeth gifted 10 memberships. So thank you. Welcome. Vesta Freya, Steve6464, Hank Says, Charlie Owen, Tom Robertson, Inquisitor Bacon, Janice Farmer, Stoner Dragon, Mighty Possum, and Clive Wells. Clive Wells, yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. And there was 10 there. Wow. So many of them out there. Let me see. Because I want to see, because I'd like to unlock the next emoji. I think that would be cool. That would be neat if we could do that. Emoji. Let me see. No, still need a few more in to get that next one. I think it's because some individuals didn't renew, so it just went for the month, so it kind of dropped down. But we'll get there. We'll get there soon. So thank you all. Thank you all for the additional ones, for the additional for the memberships, and for all the gifted memberships. I really appreciate that. Your generosity is amazing. Thank you all so very, very much. Still getting close to. Apparently, we had to get past the next level, so it's like up to 22 now. So if we get these glasses are from Zenny. Zenny is where I got these glasses. So really, really good company. Excellent glasses. Love these. These are fantastic. Oh, more of them. Mr. E-Man gifted 10 memberships. Thank you so much. Welcome, Ardo Rissanen, Arnie Gear, Lord, it's probing time. Tony Regime, Jarmaid Costello, H. Jasper E, wrote a last name, Logan Sandman, Tony Jones, Triggered Limey, Nick Oakley. Thank you all so much. Appreciate that. Thank you. Y'all rock. Wow, look at all these. I think everybody wants to see what this next emoji is going to be, is what it is. As a matter of fact, if we hit that, let me go ahead and pull it up. I don't want to spoil it. But there it is. Yeah. Because if I remember correctly, yeah. Okay, so that's already in there, and we got the next one. Yep. So I've got the next one set, which I think people will dig. And if we go there, so the studio says 12. The studio says 12. So we will get there eventually. We will get there. We will get there soon. I thank everybody for their generosity, and thank you, Void Flux, who's become a fresh member of the Godless Army. Thank you so much, Void. I appreciate that support. You rock. Yes, the Neil. No, then tease it. Yeah. I don't want to spoil this one because I really, really like this one. I like this one. It's up there with like, I like, like Hail Sagan, the yeah, no, the Greg Locke emoji, which I think is one of my favorites. But I really like this upcoming one. YouTube is killing us. This is true. YouTube is killing us. But thank you all so very, very much for that. It looks like what I'm estimating is it looks like it's 11 more. emoji. Yeah, looks like, it says 11. That's what the studio says, 11. Matt Koala, yes, that's my guy right here that Irish Demon sent me. Yes, Frayed Edge. Yes, I appreciated Frayed Edge's generosity. Thank you so much for the gifted memberships, Frayed. I thought I said thank you. I can't talk. Mr. E-Man, who's been a member for 11 months of the Godless Army. Thank you so much, Mr. E-Man. Appreciate that. HS per E, who's been a member for 18 months. Thank you so much. And Frayed Edges says for 2 Australians, says, yo, I gifted 10. Shout me out, bro. I shout you out, bro. Thank you for the 10. You rock. That was so ridiculous. That was so silly and cheesy. Thank you, Frayed Edges, for your support. I really do appreciate that. You rule, dude. You really do. Always just out of reach. That's because it drops down and you got to kind of like get back up. Because once you get the emojis unlocked and you put an emoji in there, you'll always have access to it. But if the memberships drop down, then you won't be able to add a new one until you get back past those milestones. So that's what that's about. That's the reason that occurs. But I love unlocking new emojis for y'all. I really dig them. And I think this one is appropriate. This next one that I have coming up is appropriate. So, but thank you very much, Frayed Edges, for the gifted memberships. I do appreciate that. All right. Well, I think that is about it. So we were 11 away, but that's okay. We will get there. And we, if we get there before the month of May is out, then that'll be really, really cool. To give kind of an update on what is going on. Mr. E-Man says, I'm disappointed that I did not get you there. And we will get there. We'll get there, Mr. E-Man. I promise. Thank you for the generosity. It's amazing. I appreciate the support. And you gave a bunch of people channel access, which is really, really cool. So thank you very, very much. So an update on what's going on. So this weekend, I am going out of town. Now, I know I've been doing really, really good as far as the schedule goes with having, Regios, just thank you, Regios. Just gifted 10 Bridge the Divide memberships. So welcome Tsunami, Caliban, Minx, Frayed Edges, and the George said, Sumi, Monster Jr., Spark 1982, S. Beaufort, Mr. Andrat Unlocked, Haley Taylor, and Aniceto Maldonado. You guys rule. Thank you very, very much. I think that makes us like one away. Oh, admit I'm upselling. Of course I'm upselling. Of course I am. I'm gonna upsell it. I mean, I even have a store, but the link for that's in the description. If you want to go to the store and check it out, I have a bunch of stuff on there. You know, I have a really cool it was a very cool dilemma. There was the Epicurus dilemma where it's like, coffee mug, which I think is really neat. I have cool stuff on the store, but you can go to the store and buy if you want. You can check it out. It supports the channel. I have a cool some t-shirts, stickers, mug there. Just fun stuff that people may dig. Let me see. I always feel weird like hitting people. I like giving people things. I like giving people stuff. And it says one more needed. So we're one away. That's what it says. To get the 16th emoji. And I hope it's not a lie. I really do. I hope it's not lying to me. I'll be so pissed if it is. Oh, yes. Freddy Edge says, remember to turn on gifts allowed if you didn't receive a gifted membership. Absolutely. Alan Highland is here. Says, I'm way back in the beginning, but this guy seems pretty decent for a Christian pastor. Awesome. Fantastic. Very cool. Regios gifted 1 Bridge the Divide membership. Oh, thank you, Regios. You rock. Let's see what happens. Let me go to the studio. Refresh the studio. Emoji. Mr. E-Man gifted another 5. Thank you so much. Alan Highland, Skooma Cat, Mr. E-Man, Max Plank 42, Connor O'Felt, and Aaron Reese are all members now. Everyone to the rescue. Everyone wants this new emoji is what they want. I'll tell you what. Okay, so it did jump to the next deal. So I'll tell you this. Okay, so people want to see it. I guess people assume they want to see it. So I will show it to you. So I kind of like this one because this comes up a lot. But the next emoji, well, let me ask you this. Do you want to see the next emoji? Because it's not unlocked yet. Because it jumped to the next tier. So do you want to see the next emoji? Do you want to just see it? Because I don't want people just like throwing it out there. I want people to want to be members. But I mean, I appreciate everybody's generosity and everything. And I thank you very, very much for it. Would you like to just see it? Would you like to see the next emoji? Do a sneak peek? So the people in the live chat will get to see this. And then when we hit the next emoji, when we hit the next one, we'll be able to see it. So yeah, everybody sounds like it looks like. Okay, now I feel like I've built it up and it's not going to like meet expectations, but this is it. I'll just share it. It's evidence ape. Because he wants evidence. Give me your evidence. So whenever somebody is on here, if I'm talking with somebody, they make a claim, evidence ape would like, and they make a claim, evidence ape would like that evidence, please. If they make a claim, evidence ape wants evidence. So I thought that was fitting. I found that picture of an orangutan being like, give me. It's like evidence. And that's, I know it's silly. It's silly, isn't it? It didn't live up to expectations, did it? It doesn't live up to expectations, does it? I know people. I feel like I should have delivered something magical, But that's the next emoji. So evidence ape wants evidence. That was kind of the joke there. So, but I hope that y'all like it. Soon we will get that unlocked. All right. So as far as an update goes, there's all the cool emojis. And is that the Bruce Lee come hither gesture? Kind of, yeah. It's like, bring it, like evidence ape wants evidence. All right, so this weekend I'm going out of town. I'm going back down to Texas. I have got a film shoot that I'm going down to. I'm going to do some behind the scenes stuff. All of that's going to be available via the Week in Horror Patreon. And if you're subscribed over there, if you're a Patreon over Week in Horror, you'll have early access to that. Behind the scenes interviews and pictures and stuff from our current film shoots. So I'll be down in Texas for a couple of days. I don't know if I'm going to have something that comes out on Tuesday, but I'm going to try and maintain my schedule. Week in Horror will continue as normal every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central. So feel free to jump over there and subscribe there. As far as that goes, Week in Horror is looking strong. What are we away from? 15, 115? We are 115 away from 1,000 over at Week in Horror. Hopefully soon we will get there. Hopefully soon. Fingers crossed. So I don't know, but maybe. So, but yeah, I'll be traveling out of town and do, like Emma citation needed mug. Absolutely. And maybe I'll make an evidence ape mug for the Teespring. But, I've got mugs and stickers and all kinds of stuff over there at the Teespring. The link is in the description. You can always check that out. So that's pretty much it. So, like I said, I'll be going out of town. Cool content coming from there. We'll keep doing stuff here on Bridge the Divide and hopefully have more conversations like we had with Joe today. Week in Horror every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central Time. It's going to continue as usual. We are coming up on the end of season 4, which is pretty bad. It's only a few months away. So awesome stuff. So a huge, giant thank you to all of the new channel members, all you amazing new channel members. A huge, giant thank you to all of the super chats. All of that goes to support the channel here and make sure I can keep doing what I'm doing. I appreciate that. Thank you all very, very much. And this has been amazing. This has been a lot of fun. Been really, really good. So 3 hours, 30 minutes. I think it's a perfect time to call it. So as usual, I am JL. This has been Bridge the Divide. Be safe. Be excellent to each other. And together we can bridge the divide. Thank you.